This is the D6 generation with your hosts, Craig Gallant.
No, cut that. Keep that. Someday it's going to be worth something.
Russ Wakeland.
You put me in an ATST with frickin' Wookiees attacking me and whatnot?
Now you're talking. And Geoff Englestein in the third chair.
What do you want, my nom de pod?
With contributions from Total Fangirl.
Vampires do not sparkle.
And our loyal listeners.
Are you crazy? That's like 400 hours of gamer nonsense.
Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire, the roundtable discussion of all things gaming, coming at the speed of a Games Workshop IP lawyer after the next person who says big shoulder pad. Today's edition is brought to you by all of our patrons from Patreon who help keep the lights on. This time we're thanking Gert, Paul, Chris, Stewart, and Mal. That Mal? Probably not that Mal, but a good Mal. I'm Gleekly McNerdigan, your host. Today our panelists are Russ, Squad Leader Wakeland, and designer, podcaster, and putter familias to the next greater gaming gang, Geoff, Central Officer Englestein. Let's begin. Issue number 1. Intellectual property is a legal term that refers to creations of the mind. Examples of intellectual property include music, literature, and other artistic works, discoveries and inventions, and words, phrases, symbols, and designs. Question. Although companies spend billions to protect their ideas, images, and more around the globe, it is still a pervasive problem. That would be piracy. Roughly what percent of the global economy, forensic economists believe, can be attributed to pirated material? Richard Worley Wakeland.
23%.
Edward Englestein.
2.5%.
That's closer, but makes you both wrong. 5 to 7%, actually, which I still thought was pretty big for piracy. Army matey. Issue number 2. In the board game XCOM, players work together to repel an invasion of insidious and evil alien attackers. Each player takes on a different role in the defense of Earth as the alien threat builds and builds. Question. In the chaos and tumult of an alien invasion, tracking your men can be difficult. When the end comes and the final mission is upon you, is it legal to draw 2 regular missions to continue your advancement? Cuss the nonplussed Russ.
I'm going to go with negative.
Geoff the profoundly deaf.
Yes, you can.
And that's a split vote, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go to the judges. And according to the designer, no, which makes the genius designer wrong and Russ right.
Woohoo!
I think it just means that the original designer was wrong.
He was wrong. Right. The fog of war is the uncertainty in a situational awareness experienced by participants in military operations. The term seeks to capture the uncertainty regarding one's own capability, and adversary intent during an engagement, operation, or campaign. The term is also used to define uncertainty mechanics in war games. Question. When you are referring to the fog caused by too much information coming into personnel at once, what is the proper term? Awed Wonderment Wakeland.
Too foggy to see.
Annoying Embroiling Englestein.
Misty with a chance of rain.
Yo! Oh, and he tried to be clever. Ladies and gentlemen, a golf clap for Mr. Englestein. Wrong! Emotional and computational fog, which is exactly the opposite of what happens when you're trying to write a script for rapid fire behind a ludicrous, ridiculous public school firewall. Issue number 4. When one is trying to research a topic for a quick and witty script, the internet is the only possible source for finding the widest, most implausible pieces of information in the shortest amount of time. It is invariably true, then, that the more in a hurry someone is, the more likely they are going to run into the most ridiculous difficulties. Question. On a scale of 1 through 10, with 1 being Crossy Roads as a floppy fish, and 10 being ghosts and goblins on steroids, how stupid is it that I couldn't access the Wikipedia page for XCOM from my desktop at school to research for the darn show? Pilar Primo de Rivera Russ.
I'm going to go with 7, but I'm also impressed that you know what Crossy Roads is.
Giovanni Gentile Geoff.
Oh, that's a 12 for sure.
Oh, guys, seriously, think of the children. It's a 1. Kids could get on that computer. Seriously, XCOM, Wikipedia, these things are dangerous. That's it for now. Thanks for listening and good night.
This episode of the D6 generation is brought to you by Lone Wolf Development. Take your game to the next level.
And by Geek Nation Tours. Rise up and join the Geek Nation, touring the world at geeknationtours.com.
And by Audible. Try the service, get a free book, and support the show. All by visiting audibletrial.com/D6G. Hello.
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 Hey, and welcome to episode 166. You know, it's not 500, but we'll take it. Of the D6 generation. I'm Russ Wickland.
What just happened, man? I'm Craig Alon.
And I'm Geoff Englestein.
Hey, Geoff, how's it going? Welcome
Going
back
great,
to the
guys.
Oh, good.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, always excited to have you back on the show. So, Geoff is here with us today, which is always exciting. And we were going to talk about peeing freely.
Mm-hmm.
Is that
something like that?
Was that the topic?
I pee freely.
Yes. Intellectual
That's right.
property.
One of my favorite authors.
Yes. We're going to talk about intellectual property, Geoff, because Jeff's worked with a few of those now or something. And so is Craig. So we thought we'd talk about that. And then later, we're going to talk about the board game XCOM, or I think it's pronounced XCOM, the board game, but that's also on the docket.
I think it's more of a spelling and grammatical structure issue than a pronunciation.
Look, sequencing is for pansies, okay?
Yes.
So, but you know, before we get to all that, we should mention, we already chatted with Geoff briefly at Dunkin' Donuts. Do you remember that, Craig?
Yes, I do.
Geoff, do you remember what we talked about when we ran into you at Dunkin' Donuts?
We talked about superhero TV shows.
Yeah,
right.
we did.
Which is
I prefer
a
the
lot
term
of fun right now.
Pulp comic book TV shows.
Pulp comic, okay.
I'm just making stuff up. I don't
You
know.
are. I think, so,
Yeah,
so
we talked about comic book shows, and it was a lot of fun. It's a great topic. It's a great time to be involved in that. There's so much that's out there that it was a fertile topic for sure.
Exactly right.
Fertile.
So if people want to listen to the Lost Chapters, Craig, what is the best bet they should do?
They should go to our website, thed6generation.com, and they should look for Patreon, the button, and they should go check that out. And you can throw us a little tip every episode. And what happens is you get all of the Lost Chapters for free.
Nice. Very cool. That's right. So what you want to do is head over
I
there.
should say included in your tip.
Included in your tip. That's right. Included in the tip. So, awesome. So if you are interested in that, just head on over there and do as Craig said. Now, let's see. What else should we talk? I think, Craig, what is it time now for?
Right about now, it's probably time for Achievements in Gaming.
Indeed it is. And Achievements in Gaming is brought to us by all of our great friends over at Patreon, right? Who are listening to us right now on our live broadcast on Mixlr. Did you know that? You can do
I
that
did not
if you're
know
on
that.
Patreon. That's right. So check out all that out. If you kind enough to donate to the show, you get all kinds of bonus stuff. It's just like that. That's how and that's all possible thanks to our friends over Patreon. So thank you very much to all the guys and gals who make that all
See,
possible.
I was promised before I came on the show that if I said something stupid that it could be edited out, and now I find out that is not the case, Mr. Wickland.
The D6 generation is recorded live in front of a studio audience.
That's true. And we keep it.
My reputation for witty repartee is only because of extensive editing, so this is a problem.
It's just like Happy Days, live in front of a studio audience. And we're also old. That's also part of the thing. So Geoff, speaking of Riddy Weppart, I can't even pronounce the word. See, what have you been playing lately?
Well, I finally, actually, just last night, got to play a game that's been on my want to be played list for quite some time, which is Pax Porfiriana. Which I think came out about 2 years ago, and it's a Phil Eklund game. And he is from Sierra Madre Games. He's known for extremely detailed simulations. He did one called High Frontier about exploring the solar system, which has such a gorgeous map. I actually have it framed and hanging in my office at work.
Nice.
Megafauna, which is about the development of creatures across the planet. And it's just, he gets into these incredibly insane ones. And this one happens to be about this period in Mexico around the Mexican Revolution in the 1900s. And have not had a chance to play it, did not own this one. It's very tough to get now. I think it's like over $100 at this point if you want to get a copy. And finally corralled one of my friends who has it, and we sat down and played a 3-player game of this. And it's really interesting. It's a card game, and there's a lot of detail in it, but with factions and different types of governments. And just overall a really interesting game about a period in history that I knew absolutely nothing about. And once we got into it, played in about 60, 90 minutes. So, it was definitely lived up to the hype that I had heard about it.
Worth the quest.
Yes, and I think I finally figured out how to pronounce it correctly. It's Pax Porfiriana.
Ooh, very cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like one that it wouldn't even matter if you did it correctly, because nobody's going to do it the same way twice
I think
in
that
a row.
you are
That's
probably
right.
correct. Yeah. And on the other end of the extreme, we've also been having a lot of fun playing the new kind of party game from Vlada Chvátil, who has made such fantastic games like Galaxy Trucker and Space Alert and Through the Ages and Dungeon Lords, all of which are favorites of mine.
Yes.
So when he had a new party game coming out about drawing pictures, I had to give it a shot. And it's become kind of a favorite around here. We've played it 3 times so far. It's called Pictomania.
Yes.
Funny you should mention that.
Yes. And I think the U.S. version, if memory serves me correctly, is from our friends at Stronghold Games.
It is. They were kind enough to send us a copy along, and we've been playing the heck out of that game, and it is a blast.
Okay, so
yeah.
you know how much fun it is, and
yes.
For those of you that aren't familiar with it, just real quickly, it's like sort of like Pictionary, except that you're randomly assigned one of 42 possible things to draw a picture of. There are these cards, and you get a symbol and a card that's going to be on, and you secretly have to draw from that. But everybody is drawing simultaneously. Everybody has a different assignment of this list of things that can possibly be drawn. So you have to kind of simultaneously draw and watch what other people are drawing, because you want to, if you can be the first person to correctly guess, or the first 1 or 2 people to correctly guess drawings from other people, you're going to get lots of points. If you finish kind of your guessing stuff really quickly, then you can grab these bonus tiles. So there's a little bit of a gamer aspect of it that you're not just sitting there drawing, but you got to be kind of, you can spend time drawing, or you can just draw really quickly and spend time watching other people and then come back to your drawing later, or there's different approaches you can take, and there's different levels of these cards that you can play. And we up to level 4. Level 1 is the simpler ones for the kids. We've been playing on level 3, which will have you draw, it'll have like grove, arboretum,
right.
orchard. And you have to pick, you're going to be assigned one of these things to draw. And everyone's looking at his cards like, is that an arboretum or an orchard? What is he trying to draw?
Yeah.
So on the higher levels, it gets pretty subtle and fun.
It gets insane. The very highest level is like all emotions and whatnot. So it's really tricky, but I love it.
Or 5 different kinds of lawyer.
Yes. Is that case law or bankruptcy law? I can't tell.
But we've been having a lot of fun with that one.
It's great. I love it too. And I love the meta game and sort of gamery game aspects of it. For example, if you know that you've got the card in the wavy column, you know that no one's drawing anything in the wavy column card. That kind of thing.
Right.
So there's this meta you can get to when you're really trying to get strategic. And I love the scoring system where guessing early has its advantages but disadvantages. Guessing too late has advantages and disadvantages. So it feels like Vlada really nailed all the different ways people would try to game the system and actually made that part of the game, which is my favorite part of it.
Yeah, and I did hear that at the recently completed Gathering of Friends up in Niagara Falls that he was showing off a new word game that he has.
Oh, nice.
That's supposed to be out in the fall. So I'm excited to see what that's all about, because that was getting reviews too. So he continues to just dive into all these different genres, which I'm sure is a lot of fun for him and for us as well.
Cool.
And also I've just been doing tons of playtesting, most of which I can't really talk about, but it's, We always have a lot of different games in the hopper, and we have a lot of friends around here in the gaming community that are designers, and they're always bringing their stuff, and we're trying different things and trying to push the envelope in different directions. So it's always a lot of fun. In fact, it seems now I probably 80% of the games I play are prototypes, and very few actual published games at this point.
Well, that's just a shame for you.
Exactly right.
Sucks to be me.
Muffin.
Oh,
well, you say that until you play some of these prototypes, and they just go completely off the rails.
yeah.
There's probably something to be said for playing tried and true games that have made it through the full mill first.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's great, Geoff. Well, that's pretty good gaming for all the busyness you got going on there.
Lot.
It is. Craig, what have you been gaming lately?
Well, let's see. I had another game of Planetfall.
Oh, nice.
This time I played against the Ceruleans, Jeremy playing the Ceruleans, and that was cool. I have no idea how they played, because for the first time in my entire life, my dice were burning hot. And I could do no wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The first volley of the game kind of took out a bunch of my buggies, and I was like, oh no, my buggies, oh, this is gonna stink. And then I could not miss. I could not fail to hack big giant monster walker thing. Oh, it was amazing. It was great.
Wow.
I don't usually get a game like that, but it was still fun. Good game. Loved that game. I have not yet had a single experience in that game that made me doubt that it was a very, very, very solid, awesome game of its type with the at that scale and everything that we've been doing. I just really loved it. Then I played another game of Armada. I did another beginner game with Dave from the Nerd Herders podcast, and still love that game too. And then my friends at the Low Jog, the League of Just Ordinary Gentlemen, we played in John's and Russ's brother John's. We had another game in that campaign. So now that officially actually makes it a campaign.
That's right.
Because we've had 2 games.
Yes, one game does not a campaign make. That's the first rule of role-playing.
Right. Yep, so that's all excited. So we have now played 2 solid games, completely following the rules, which is fun. I do not remember who tweeted and or emailed it, but somebody called us on the holding action for D&D 5e, and I got to pull that on John on Sunday night. Because he was like, okay, well, you can hold it. I was like, no, you can't. Ha ha. Because those guys are playing half 4 and half 5. I'm convinced, but I don't care. I'm loving it. And advantage, disadvantage. Once again, like the MVP of game mechanics.
Oh yeah,
it was just awesome throughout. And we were even offering advantage and begging for, or offering disadvantage and begging advantage for all kinds of cool stuff that was happening. So that was just really, really cool. And it's the campaign is now taken on a noticeably aquatic feel, which I will address in a later segment of the achievements in gaming.
Okay.
What about you, Russ? What have you played?
Well, let's see. I played Jeff. You're going to help me with the pronunciation of this game. Tokaido. Tokaido. Thank you. I knew I'd get it wrong. Tokaido, which is a very interesting Japanese-themed hiking game. So you're basically on a little hike up the side of it looks like you're going up, so I'm going to say up the side of a mountain. The interesting mechanic in this game that totally I couldn't get my brain around is, so basically each of you is playing one little hiker, and you get a character that is got some kind of special ability, and essentially you're scoring victory points for doing the sorts of things that I've now determined I've learned that Japanese folks do whilst on a hike. So
it's educational. That's
good. So for example, whilst hiking, a typical Japanese person likes to make a painting, eat some food, talk to travelers, and I feel like there's one. Go to the church and go to the bank. I'm not really sure what the banks are doing on the side of the mountain, but they're there also. Now, to be fair, I've never hiked Mount Fuji, so for all I know, there may be banks along the way. But in this game, there are banks. And so what you do is you take your little meeple, and you can, along the route's kind of segmented up, I think, into, Jeff, you probably played this before too, right? Probably like 4 big segments, each separated by a restaurant or a place to eat. And you can essentially move your figure anywhere to any spot between where you are now and the next restaurant, and pick whatever you want to get. And depending on where you stop, you're going to get something. You're going to get a painting partially completed, which is worth 50 points. You might be able to go shopping to buy some gear, which if you get the right sets of those, you get victory points. You can talk to the traveler and get something random and cool. Oh, there's also a hot spring. I know this because my character likes to stop at hot springs. Hot spring, which invigorates you and gets you victory points. Basically, everything you do gets you victory points, but you want to be eclectic and try to do lots of little things so that you get different kinds of victory points. But here's the thing. If you go really, really far, which you can choose to do, you'll get to pick exactly what you want to do. But the person who's the least highest up the mountain gets to go next. So if you go a very short distance, you'll get more turns before you get to the rest stop. But if you go a longer distance, you'll get what you want first, but you won't get as far. You won't get to go as often. So it's a really interesting mechanic. I could not get my head around, Jeff, whether or not I wanted to be last and go often or get to what I wanted first. And so I ended up coming in dead last in victory points in this game. Have you tried Tokaido?
This is one of the ones I have not had a chance to try. That's definitely on my list. I know that, just from reputation, it's supposed to be excellent, and especially the graphic presentation is supposed to be just phenomenal on this one. And I have seen the board and people play it, and it just seems like a very pleasant experience playing the game.
It's very nice. The art's fantastic. The component quality is really off the charts. Nice linen stuff, cards, and everything. It's a really it's hard for me to get my head around how it works, but it's a really innovative game. Very simple too, which I liked.
Yep.
So if you like Japanese hiking themed games, this one's right for you there.
This is the top Japanese hiking themed game that's been done.
And when you have to follow the Jones theory, you're probably not going to have to throw anything away.
This game fits in everyone's collection, no doubt. Also played another full, when I say full, I mean 2 boxes.
300 points is what you mean, Russ.
300 points.
Don't say 2 boxes. That limits it. Okay. Say 300 points, which
300
is a full
points.
size.
So I played 300 points, and I was teaching our friend Adam, who's also an avid miniature wargamer, hardcore Malifaux dude. And so this was his first game, but of course I figured he'd done some research and knew what he was doing, kind of. So we would build our forces. He did something that surprised me. He only took half the allotted X-Wings and took a lot of points in upgrade cards. And this just goes to show you how flexible the game already is, even with just the 2 starter boxes. And he came at me in ways that I didn't expect to be possible, and basically took my 1 Star Destroyer apart piecemeal, with my 2nd Star Destroyer being unable to engage him, and all I did was light damage to his Admiral's flagship, which immediately repaired itself. So I essentially lost that game in order, and the only thing that was dead. So at the end of the game, I had lost a Star Destroyer and half of my TIE fighters. He had lost 2 X-Wing squadrons.
Hey, good job. You killed another X-Wing squadron from the time I left.
I did not do well in that game at all, which was awesome to see. So he did a great job, and he used all those cards very cleverly to transfer damage, get a lot of repair points, and kept healing, and really forced me to focus on my fire on the same ship, which is Admiral's ship, which seemed very like a smart thing to do for me, because I'm like, oh, it's his Admiral's with a lot of victory points. But he kept healing the guy. It was driving me crazy. So very clever, lots of cool options there. Now he's going to make me go back to the well and rethink my Imperial fleet construction. So really great game already, just with what's in the starter boxes times 2. So I'm really liking that. And then also, like you, Craig, I played more Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So my daughters and I got together. Now, this is the 2nd campaign that I've started. And so Craig, the water thing. So John told me, so this whole story is, so when his kids were on school break last time, they wanted to play D&D, and because we couldn't get together, so he started playing a game with just his kids, started a whole new campaign, and he did this whole underwater adventure with them. So my girls are like, well, we want our own campaign. And so I'm like, okay, so we'll start that. And so we played a couple sessions of that, and now they've just discovered that this campaign is going to be, I was like, well, if John can do water, I'm going to do air. So I'm doing the whole airship thing. So they just got through their first sort of little mini dungeon the side of a mountain, and have just boarded this giant airship, and I made a stop at the end of that, and they're very upset because they want to see what happened next. But we're having a great time with that too. 5e is just so much fun. Really, really like that a lot. I cannot stress how much fun we're having with that edition of the game. So if you like Dungeons & Dragons all, or ever like Dungeons & Dragons, I know we already did a full review of it, but you owe it to yourself to take a look again, because it's back and it's good. So all right, what about modeling? Geoff, have you done any modeling? Built anything, painted something?
Unfortunately, I haven't done much in the miniatures realm lately. Brian was kind of my miniatures partner, my son, and since he's been at school for the last 3 years, I haven't done as much War Machine, et cetera, like we used to do. So the impetus has fallen out. But I have done a lot of kind of arts and craftsy stuff in the prototype realm. I've been working on this World War II game, which has like 200 cards in it. So I keep, just taking what I've done and throwing it away and redoing all the cards and doing taking out the X-Acto knife and sleeving things. So I've been doing a lot of that, a lot of tiles, so all kinds of different stuff like that. And I've kind of enlisted now. We have a nice 3D printer at work, and I've enlisted that to start making prototype parts, pawns and ships and things like that for various games. So that's I've been sneaking in after hours and cranking out some of those parts. So that's been an interesting way to make some of these game components that I've been enjoying.
That's very clever. Cool.
Nice.
Very nice. That counts. How about you, Craig? What have you been painting?
Well, I pulled that Directorate core, half helix core, out of the fire from last episode. I was able to fix my massive, ridiculous mistakes, and I thought I made a mistake again because I wasn't getting the same sort of sheen off of it, but then my inking dried and it was all set. So those are almost done. I just need to do a little bit of detail work and the bases, and then I will have a full core helix, a heavy helix, and the allied helix. So I'll pretty much have everything that's available now for one side of Planetfall. And in the middle of trying to finish that project, your brother was like, "Hey, do you have any?" And then he just sent me a giant list of types of things, and included fish people,
Fish people.
pirates, warriors, and most of this was misspelled and or auto-corrected into oblivion. So it was a very, very difficult conversation. Civilians, elves, fish.
Very small
Not
rocks.
to be confused with fish people.
Right.
And so I was like, oh God, I don't know. So I started digging through my bones collection. And of course I did the first bones and I did not do the second bones. So of course, most of the fish were in the second bones, I come to find out. So I started asking around, and some folks were like, oh, we'll do trades and stuff. And other folks were like, I've never touched a bone in my life and I've got all these in my basement. Have whatever you want. So I went with those. And I gathered a bunch of that. But while I was gathering those and priming them with, I use Army Painter to prime the bones, because priming bones is not easy, and you can get it all sticky and tacky and gross if you use the wrong stuff. And I just heard I do not like Army Painter primer, black primer. It's glossy. It comes off really glossy, but it doesn't make the models tacky. So there's that. While I was waiting to get my hands on all those aquatics that your brother wanted, I painted 32 other miniatures in 2 days.
Wow.
Because those things, I'm just painting them up to tabletop quality. I'm not doing any Golden Demon versions on these. But I think they look cool. I got a bunch of warriors. I got a bunch of pirates. I got a bunch of civilians. I got a bunch of elves. And it gave me the impetus to, okay, so the warriors are mostly going to be like guards. So they're all going to be in reds and purples. So it gave me a reason to kind of go with a color scheme. So the elves are all sort of aquatic elves. So they're all blues and greens. The pirates, I just kind of went with reds and whites just so they all look like they're, generally the same. And the civilians I kept in browns and tans. But I had a blast. It was really, really fast, and I'm really happy that a not insignificant chunk of my bones are now painted. So that was cool. And then now I've got a whole bunch of aquatics that I'm all geared up and ready to paint too. Cool. So that's what I've been painting. What about you, Russ?
Nothing. Sadly.
Oh, okay.
No, not a thing, unfortunately.
Yeah. Nice. I like it.
No zeppelins,
honest to the
nothing,
point.
No zeppelins.
No air creatures, nothing.
I don't think this
Zephyrs?
counts. I don't think this counts as modeling, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. So there's these, I did back the Kickstarter for, I can't remember what it's called. I think it's called, it's Tactiles. I don't think I talked about it in the show. TAC, like tactical, tiles.
Yeah.
And what it was it's really designed for art role-playing games, and it's these very hard plastic puzzle-like pieces, and they're about 6 by 6 each, maybe 5 by 5 inches each. And I can't remember how I got 6 or 7 of them, and they all go together like puzzle pieces and fit together, and it forms like a giant dry erase board on your table. So you lay these out, and you had a choice when you backed the Kickstarter whether you wanted to have a pre-printed grid on it or pre-printed hexagrams, and I went with the grid because I was thinking for Dungeons and Dragons, and I really used it in my last play session with my daughters because they were going through this little gnomish mountain fortress thing, and as they're going through, I'm drawing the thing, and what I found was really cool about Unexpected Bonus, unlike a regular mat, as you're drawing the dungeon on this, and you move from one tile to the other and you get near the edge of your board, what you would normally do if you have one of those giant rollout mats is now you got to somehow erase the whole thing and slide it down or draw some other, but in this one you just pop the tiles off from the bottom, erase them, and then pop them up to the top. So it's almost like you have a rolling map that just keeps going, and I didn't even think about that when I bought it. I just thought it would be easier to store and carry than a giant rolling mat, and I love them. So they are great. My girls are doodling little pictures in the corners, and it was pretty cool. So I'm really digging these tact tiles. I have no idea if they're also going to sell them beyond the Kickstarter, but most pleased with my purchase on those. So I don't know. That's not really modeling. It's just a cool gamery thing. So
I'm okay with it.
Okay, fair enough.
I'll allow it.
All right. What about other geeky goodness there, Geoff? What are you doing for books, TV shows, and all that kind of stuff?
Well, I just finished episode 8 of Daredevil.
Oh, no spoilers.
13.
I'm only on 4.
I'm on 10.
What are you guys thinking?
It is violent.
It is.
It is
my
so
wife is
brutally
Susan, watching
violent.
this, and she keeps saying, "Do they need to keep having these violent fight scenes?"
Yep.
I say yes.
I say, what's your point?
My son finished. He actually got through all 13 episodes, and he told us that he didn't think it was that violent. That's what he.
Well,
I
that's
admit that
them
it's
kids.
violent, and I like it.
that's that generation you've raised there, Geoff. You know,
yeah,
they love their
I've done
violence.
a poor job. What am I going to do? No, so we're enjoying that. And I've also just finished a very interesting science fiction book called The Three-Body Problem, which is actually by this extremely famous Chinese science fiction writer whose name I do not know, and even if I did, would not try to pronounce. And this is the first time it's been translated into English, and it's actually the first book in a trilogy, and the other ones are supposed to be coming out over the next couple of years. But it's interesting because it's such a cultural difference that, you know, the whole thing, it takes place starting during the Cultural Revolution in China and ends a few years into the future from where we are now. And so there's so much, you know, kind of unspoken assumptions about what you know about Chinese history and Chinese culture, and it's just so embedded in that it's not intended for an American audience. You know, This was written for a Chinese audience about the Chinese Cultural Revolution. So I'm just finding it fascinating because, like, the Americans are all like bit characters, or they just pop in, and they're two-dimensional characters. Like, you know, maybe in an American science fiction novel, you know, the Chinese character might come in just as to be a Chinese prop astronaut or something, you know, and it's the same kind of thing. So it's just been very interesting to see it from that perspective.
Cool.
So I did enjoy that book. I thought it went a teeny bit off the rails at the end, but I would definitely get the next one in the series when it comes out next year. So that was The Three-Body Problem. I also have started to spend a little bit of time using the Unity framework, which is a computer game development framework, which is completely free to download and ridiculoly powerful.
How complex is it to ramp up on? I mean, how hard?
It's really, well, for me, it's really easy because you can program in C# and Java, and I know those, so it's really easy to do. And it's got incredibly powerful tools in terms of particle effects and a built-in physics engine, and you know, it's really very impressive. And if this was out when I was a kid, I never would have seen the sun at all. Not that I saw it that much as it was, but
I was going to ask because my oldest daughter's kind of expressed some desire to do a little programming, so I might poke her.
You
in
know,
that
you
direction.
can get this is not a bad way to go. I mean, it's, you know, it's still kind of got that C syntax, but it's you get such immediate crazy feedback. You know, you can, you know, write a couple lines of code and you can have a functional game where you're rolling a ball around and, you know, knocking pins over and stuff like that, or launching things at brick walls and having them explode. That
Unity, huh? All right, check that out.
Yeah, totally free.
Cool. Yep.
And I highly recommend it just to mess around with. I also continue my Hearthstone obsession.
I blame you for this addiction now, Geoff. So I had managed to avoid Hearthstone for a while.
Yeah.
And then the iPhone version came out.
Yeah, that's bad. It's bad.
And well, actually, what got me in trouble was, so we were on Battle.net. I got my girls addicted about a month ago we started playing around with StarCraft. And while we're on Battle.net with StarCraft, of course, Blizzard's got this great cross-promotional thing like, oh, look, here's Hearthstone. If you play a game, you get a free, you know, StarCraft thing. I'm like, well, I'll just play one game. What could possibly go wrong? And, so, and they make it free, which is even, you know, eviler.
Right.
But I was able to resist it because it was on my desktop. And, you know, now that it's on my phone, Geoff, and it's such a great implementation on the iPhone, it's like so easy to play. I'm like, oh, no. And I'm really digging this little card game.
It's good, and you don't have to spend, hardly any money. I mean, it's free to play and stuff, and you can pay for packs, but they make it really easy to get new packs.
Yeah.
Just by playing and doing these quests and things. So it's a really clean design. They made a lot of smart design choices. Actually, I don't remember the exact episode number, but I think about 10 episodes ago on the our Ludology podcast, we actually had the lead designer from Hearthstone on as a guest, and we talked about a lot of the design decisions. So it's pretty cool. I'm not as thrilled with some of the newer cards. They've added a lot more randomness into the game. A lot of the newer cards are, like attack a random enemy, or you may, you just random. You can draw any card in the entire deck, in the entire of any card that exists in the Hearthstone universe. So it can be, just some crazy effects that happen all of a sudden. But it's still taking up a disproportionate amount of my time when I have those little 10-minute interstitial breaks.
So I'll be happy to battle you there. Just keep an eye out for Red Tooth there. I'll take you.
Okay. I'll friend you.
All right, cool.
We can do that. And this is some late breaking news, which I'm pretty excited about and a little bit trepidatious about, but I'm sure Craig will talk me off the ledge, which is I was asked and extremely flattered to be asked to teach a graduate course at NYU on game design.
Wow.
For their game design program. So this is going to be a board game development class for second-year graduate students. So they have to take a full year of introduction to game design, which covers all kinds of basics on all different types of gaming. And then this is for a class for those that want to specialize in board game design. So
piece of cake, Geoff. Piece of cake.
Yeah.
Grown-ups who are generally either not having to pay because they're so smart they got full boats, or they're paying for themselves. So you don't have to worry about any of that college stuff where they don't care and they don't appreciate it. And clearly they're interested in the topic. Piece of cake.
Okay, well, I think
we'll
see.
I think you'll be great.
So this is in the fall semester. So I'm going to be spending the summer working on a curriculum and getting books and all that kind of good stuff. So so I'm excited about that.
That's awesome. So is there like an MBA program or whatever?
Yeah, no, it's an MFA actually.
MFA for board game design?
It's a 3-year MFA program in game design. It's the NYU Game Center, and they do fantastic work there.
Cool.
So I'm excited about being on the faculty there, and they have a lot of it's a really big program, very very prestigious.
Oh, very cool.
They get a lot of good students there that are doing some terrific stuff. So I'm looking forward to being a part of that in the fall.
That's awesome, Geoff. So that's great. That's amazing. That's well done. Congratulations. Very cool. So Craig, what about you? What's your other stuff?
What about my other stuff? Daredevil also.
Yeah.
I'm just excited that now I'm ahead of Geoff.
Yes.
Of course, now I'm leaving tomorrow at 4:00 in the morning, so he'll be able to catch up and beat me.
Yeah.
And he'll beat me to the finish line.
So does he regain his eyesight in the last episode?
Yes. Oh, spoiler!
Spoilers. No, he does not get his eyesight back.
No. I will tell you, he doesn't have his suit yet, which I'm starting to get a little concerned about.
Yeah.
And let's see, Vikings, 1 episode left. I'm gonna miss that also. South Africa, you better be worth it. I'm really excited about that. I don't know. I'm very nervous. They've got me on this on the edge of my seat with waiting for the last episode of Vikings.
So you got to try. I want to try that show now. I'm
telling you, man. Once you get over the fact that you're empathizing with vicious, ridiculous killers,
okay,
you just let that go and you're all good.
Kind of like The Sopranos,
Kind of like that. Yeah,
okay.
Kind of like that a lot.
All right.
Still listening to Clash of Kings, the audiobook. Loving it. Of course, got the audiobook from audible.com. Once again, 1 credit for a George R.R. Martin book now. So we're in the new era of listening to audiobooks. Russ, if I wanted to get the next book, where would I go?
Well, you'd go to the D6generation.com and click the Audible ad in the upper right-hand corner there. That would take you to Audible and get you the great D6G deal, which is 1 free credit, which gets you a book to keep forever, even if you decide to not sign up and pay anything. And if you do stay, though, then you also get 30 days free to try Audible and get also all the great deals. They have member deals all the time. And then should you stay on, you'll get a credit a month, or you can pick different plans for how many credits you want. And it's just a great way. And I've been an Audible member since, 2001, and I have hundreds of books, and I love it. And I go back through once in a while and re-listen to various books, and it's just fantastic. And I love it, and I love all the different stories. And I've got certain favorite narrators, and it's just a lot. It's great. The best way to read a book when you don't have time to read, because you can find that time when you're mowing the lawn or driving in a car or painting miniatures or whatever.
Exactly. It's awesome. And it's a great way to go back and find out, where did George go off the rails?
Have you found it
So
yet?
far, he's still on the rails, and I'm almost, and I knew that. I knew Clash of Kings was still super solid. Storm of Swords, I know, is super solid. So,
Which story? Clash of Kings.
Clash
is
of
the
Kings
second
is,
one or the third one?
Yeah, it's the second one.
Okay.
So,
Just very quick story with that, if I may interject.
Yes, please do.
I read those books back when I started.
Back when people read like off paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Back then, when I still have the paperback sitting on my shelf, but there were 3 books in the series that were out, and it was highly. So it was just Storm of Swords, I guess, was the third one, and that one was out, and so someone totally recommended it to me, and I read the first one, and I was really excited, and I jumped in, and I read the second one, and I completely thought it was a trilogy, and then I was like halfway through the third book, and I started to panic. I was like, there is no way that this is ending, that this series is ending. And I went back to my friends like, you told me that it was a trilogy and there were just 3 books. He said, no. He said, I just said there were 3 books. I did not say that it ended.
And back then we were waiting for.
Thank you very much.
And we were waiting for years for the 4th one back then.
Oh yeah,
right?
it was
like,
a long wait between, because it was just right when the third book had come out at that point. So it was a long time.
But nobody had ever done that to us before. So none of us were emotionally ready for a series to just suddenly stop coming out for 5 years.
Right.
Yeah. Ridiculous.
And then who makes a TV show about a series that's not done? It's like, but
geniuses.
They basically went to him and said, "We're fixing it. We're just going to get rid of all the stuff that you shouldn't have written in the first place, and
give us your outline, and we're going to go fix this."
You know what? There are millions of people out there who want to know how this ends, and they don't think you're going to be able to tell them. So we're going to take it. We're going to capitalize on.
Here's
that.
a bag of money, and give us the outline. We're done.
Exactly. Yeah. A bag of money and an outline. That's all.
Right.
And I have been
fair
watching
trade.
the show. I forgot to mention that in my other, but I have been watching the new Game of Thrones season.
Yeah.
So that did start. So.
Episode 2. I'm still waiting. The Sand Snakes come out in episode 4, I believe.
Yeah, Sand Snakes.
Yep. So I'm enjoying that. And I did read right after we got finished talking with John, actually, John Regal in the last episode. I jumped on my Kindle and I ordered Maelstrom's Edge Faith, Battle for Zycanthus Book 1.
Nice. By
Thomas L. Martin and Stephen Gaskell. And it's fun.
Is that
it's
the short version of the title, or is that that's the full title?
Well, it's a bit, it takes itself seriously, as the title suggests. There's a lot of subtitles going on there, but it's a fun read. I think it's going to be a very interesting universe to game in.
Cool.
So it'll be cool. You do get, he was right, you do get a glimpse of a lot of other cool
factions,
troop types that are going to be out there. So that's cool. And I'm not for nothing, but I will tell you right now, I'm going to be mean. Mm-hmm. I am, at the moment that I am speaking, looking at a picture sent to me from Neil Fawcett's phone of a certain licensed miniature game that will be released this coming weekend at Salute. So these pictures that I'm looking at won't be news by the time people hear my voice saying it. But right now, none of you have seen it. Neener, neener, neener.
That must be the Halo stuff, right?
It is the Halo stuff, and it looks like it is going to invite comparisons to Star Wars Armada.
Oh, interesting.
Mechanics wise.
Is there like some kind of measuring stick that bends?
There is not. No.
Okay.
I don't think I'm giving anything away because he did say this isn't ready for release yet, but I know that this show won't go live before Salute, and I know that they're going to be demoing the game with people from Microsoft all weekend long at Salute.
Right.
So they're super excited about. There's like a bust. Your commander. You have a bust for your commander.
Nice.
They've painted up the human one to look like a hologram.
Awesome.
Those blue glowy holograms.
Yep, right.
So it looks very. The models are on stands that look very reminiscent to the.
Are there like
the Star Wars?
So there's more artwork on the stands and firing arcs and things like that.
There's more graphic design. I'll say. I won't really. I don't know about artwork.
No dials or anything.
Graphic design.
Cool.
I'm not seeing any dials. It actually reminds me more of X-Wing than Armada. Now that you say that.
All right, that's cool.
But it looks cool. Custom dice, custom 6-sided dice.
Nice.
So it does not look like a Spartan game, except there are some tokens floating around. But it looks beautiful. So anyway, that's my last other.
Well, achievement for that. Yeah, I don't have much to add. Really, you guys covered most of it. Obviously, still watching Daredevil. That's one of my favorite shows on television right now. I'm really enjoying it. Also,
they just announced they are definitely doing a season 2.
I saw that. Very exciting. Also, I wanted to say I love the intro to that show.
It's cool.
It's close to Game of Thrones in terms of just like the captivating sort of the way it's done. I really like it. So I'm just digging Daredevil. If you're not watching Daredevil, you should. It's awesome. Mm-hmm. Still reading Septimus Heap on recommendation of my daughter. Still enjoying that book. And book 2, I mean. And also I've been playing a lot of Hearthstone, as I talked about with Geoff. So that's most of my stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of business travel recently. So not a lot of achievements in gaming this time around, sadly. So is that achievements?
That's achievements.
In a world where board gaming was king, in a time when Kickstarter ruled the web, when every day brought more and more games, now, more than ever, 2 men, and a revolving third chair, and a girl, a total fangirl, brought a shining light into the darkness so that all mankind would know what to buy. They are the D6 generation.
Hey, that howl. Although it sounded a little anemic today, Craig.
I don't know. I think that the lone wolf might have a sore throat.
Well, that howl means it's time to talk about our friends at Lone Wolf Development, makers of 3 of our favorite software products. First off, there's Army Builder, which is a fantastic way, and really, quite frankly, the best way to put together your crazy miniature war game army lists, whether they're super complicated with all kinds of options per model, or just quick and dirty, slap together a quick fleet to engage in battle. All those things happen there. All the major miniature war games are there, maintained by various members of the community. Ultimate way to do that. That's how Craig and I first fell in love with Wolf Lair. But then,
that's right.
Let's say you want to build a hero for a various our role-playing games.
I need a hero. Sorry.
That's right. You would need Hero Lab. And now the partnership between Lone Wolf Development and the Pathfinder role-playing game is so amazingly tight now. It's really, really cool.
Burning up the airwaves.
They have that crazy great iPad app that really lets you dynamically manage your hero right there on your tablet. They've got all kinds of Hero Lab extensions. They've got new custom monster designing options for Pathfinder now. They've got all kinds of different Pathfinder-specific toolboxes, melee tactics, all these great options now in Hero Lab. And then, of course, my personal favorite, what I've been using in every single one of my Dungeons & Dragons sessions with my family, is Realmworks, the ultimate way to track your campaign, track where your heroes are, your characters, all those major issues in your campaign, whether you're a planner. So I'm running 2 different campaigns now. One of them I planned out way ahead, and I do all this plotting. And the one I'm running with my 2 daughters by ourselves, I'm playing more ad hoc, and we're making stuff up as we go together. And as I do that, I'm making notes right there in the thing, so I don't forget that I just created a tavern named the Double Antlers or whatever. And so it's just a great way to do that too, and you can easily find out what you've been doing. So just great, great software for gamers over there at wolflair.com. Oh, terrible wolf today. And now, in an attempt to bring a small amount of dignity and decorum to this otherwise base form of entertainment, and I use the term loosely, I am proud to present... Oh, get on with it. It's time for App of the Ep. Seriously, Wakeland, I used to have my own segment, and now I'm relegating to announcing this pap. Hey, you're lucky we still use you. Hey, and welcome back to another App of the Ep. This time around, I've got two apps I'm sneaking in. Wakeland, that's cheating. Sorry, dude, but I'm going for it. The first one, actually, they're both very related by the same people, and these are iOS apps. So right now, I don't think they're available for any other platform besides iOS, and they are an app called Fight Club 5 and Game Master 5. And as you may remember from the show, I'm playing a lot of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition with my daughters. And my oldest daughter just decided she would like to try her hand at dungeon mastering. So she's going to be the DM. And this has required me to make a character. And while I played around with it a little bit, made a couple for fun and for NPCs, I haven't actually played my own campaign. And this got me thinking, well, I'd like to have a character sheet. And I want it on my phone so I could work on it, in the off time. And so my daughter found this one and she said, Dad, check this one out. And it's really, really cool, actually. Now, these guys their apps are so good that they actually got a cease and desist letter from Wizards of the Coast because they were including all kinds of content in there. And what it has in it, it's a really straightforward character sheet. You can download or put a nice picture in there of your character, which, you can grab great photos on the internet of whatever, your favorite dwarf cleric or whatever you happen to be doing. And then in there, you can track your hit points, your hit dice. It's clearly designed for 5e. All your maester stats, your skills. You can add any item you want to keep track of in terms of counts, number of arrows, number of times you can do a certain ability or certain spells. What's really cool, though, the reason they got the cease and desist was that originally it had all the races, all the backgrounds, all the classes, all the spells built right in. So you could just say, I'm going to, I want to take a Cure Wounds spell. And if I click it, I can actually see all the stats for Cure Wounds right there. Well, they were forced to take all that out, and they don't distribute that anymore, but they have a feature that allows you to import CSV or Microsoft Excel files into the program to get all that data. So if players make it, you can suck it right in. If you Google this stuff, you will find various databases of this information and get it in there. And it's under the open license, so you're okay getting it that way. They just can't distribute it. Anyway, works really great. And I have all the spells in there. I can pick my class. Really, really nice. Great way to track your character, your status. You can make little notes. A really handy way if you want to have a character tracking system on your iPhone. Really, really nice little thing. It is free also to grab. How it works is it's free. I think you can have one character in there. And then if you like it, there is a one-time in-app purchase. I think it's like $2, $3. I can't remember. Pretty cheap though. Less than a D20 in most stores. And you can have your very own character tracker on your iOS phone. Now also they have this other one, Game Master 5. And as you can imagine, this thing is designed to make the Game Master's life easier. And it's specifically designed to create encounters. So this isn't super fancy like campaign management or anything like that. But what this is that you can click an encounter button. You can create a new encounter, name it whatever you want. You can add your monsters or characters to the encounter. And what's really cool about this, again, originally it had all the monsters from the monster manual built right in with all their stats and specs and everything. They had to remove all that, but of course now you can import these data files from various sources and get them back in there and have all that. So you can just click a button and say, I want to make an encounter of, 2 hobgoblins and 3 goblins and 1 bugbear, and poof, they're all in there ready to do battle. What's also cool is it handles rolling initiative for you. It handles tracking each hit points for each monster. All that stuff quick and easily done. You could even add pictures. So if you have AirPlay or something on your iPhone, you can show it behind you. You could say, you run into a pack of hobgoblins, and click it and see a picture of a hobgoblin up there if you want to grab them from the internet. Great little gizmos. These aren't going to totally redefine how you role play, but if you have iOS tablets or, an iPad or an iPhone, it could be handy little devices. And that's Game Master 5 and Fight Club 5. Thank you for listening to another scintillating edition of App of the App. A segment in which, hey, less of that, more just getting on with the show. Seriously, Wakeland, you are like school in summer. No class. Hey, welcome back. And I thought, I don't get to work with anyone else's intellectual property. I just get to see all the cool stuff that comes out. I know we get excited. Like there's been announced Sorrow of the Seas Star Wars edition. You guys see this? Just came out. It's just been announced today. Yeah, they're doing
seriously
Sorrow of the Seas with Star Wars. It's called Escape the Asteroid Belt or something, but it's basically think of Sorrow of the Seas Star Wars wrapper.
Sorrow?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, now I do.
TSUO or whatever it is.
Yeah,
it's like
no.
Calliope?
That's a Yiddish thing. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah, that's a different thing.
Anywho, and Craig, you've worked in a lot of different intellectual proproperties.
I have.
And you've both other people's intellectual properties, you've had to sort of make stories and other things inside those. And then you've also had the opportunity to sort of work in a new IP and get to create characters there. And then others have gone on to take that. And then Geoff, you've done something similar. Obviously you worked with Space Cadets. And we thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about what it's like when your IP kind of gets freed. We decided we called this segment IP Freely. No? It's a joke that keeps on giving.
It's why I come.
This is what happens
on this show for the highbrow
exactly
content.
This is what happens when behind the scenes titles come into the limelight.
So I set that up. I had to work hard for that. That was not easy.
No, it even caught me by surprise, and I'm reading it.
So I thought we'd talk a little bit about this. And first, I guess the most common thing that happens when you start out in the gaming industry or other things is you end up getting the opportunity to work in someone else's intellectual property. And Craig, you've worked with, we'll start with you, but you worked with Games Workshop and Spartan Games. And of course you did some Star Wars work for Fantasy Flight. Yep. And what was it like having to kind of be inside of someone else's intellectual property? Was it intimidating? What did you first think when you got those opportunities?
Well, I mean, I'm going to talk in Ugandan click language.
Okay, let's go to Geoff.
To be honest, okay. Well, I started with Spartan Games, which was a very new game. I started with Firestorm Armada. Fleshing out the universe was very new. They'd only had one rule book out with a very minimal amount of fluff. So that was very exciting. I've done both sides of the spectrum. A very, very long established IP. Well, two actually. I did a lot of work with Warhammer 40,000 role play with Fantasy Flight. I started working with Star Wars before I had to give it up to go on to do the Wild West Exodus stuff. But working with the Spartan stuff was very exciting because there was an energy, there was almost like a chaos, so to speak, really, where things were just not fully formed yet, and so you were helping form them. Mm-hmm. So that was exciting, but at the same time, it could be frustrating because you know that you're writing stuff, but there's other people in the office that you don't ever get to talk to, then they're writing stuff. So having a unified vision is extremely difficult, and the final product is quite often not exactly what you had anticipated because it's going through, if everybody's doing it the right way, it's going through several filters before it finally goes to the public. And so, you've got a brief, and your brief is like, okay, these 8 alien species, and we just had a meeting, and these are the words that people threw out that we want these are bird based, and they're flock oriented. I'm making all this up, and they really like to eat seeds and stuff like that. And you're like, oh, okay, I can really do that with like 3,000 words. And so then you do that, and then it goes back, and they're like, oh, well, what they really want is they want gravity based weapon. And so you develop it, and it's neat and it's interesting, while at the same time there's a frustration factor as you've got so many different ideas, and you really need somebody to be managing all that effort, and communication is key.
Yeah, and I actually had I unfortunately was unable to get clearance to talk about specifics about this, but I have a friend, in quotes, who work with a company, in quotes, who had a major, a lot of games that were set in a universe that they had kind of developed. And, he was working on a new game design and had questions about how certain fluff worked and whether certain characters could do certain things. And they had a fluff master. I don't know exactly what his title was, but they had a guy, and they said, okay, any questions that you have about the world and the environment and anything, this is the guy, this is the keeper of all of the knowledge. So he played that role in that company for that universe.
Yeah, and that's huge. And Spartan Games was very young. They didn't have that. So that could be a very frustrating element. But then you go to Warhammer 40,000 with Fantasy Flight Games. Fantasy Flight, first of all, when I first started there, they had Ross Watson, who was, as every long-time listener knows, a ridiculous trivia master where 40K was concerned. In addition to that, Games Workshop has Alan Merritt, who is the guardian of the IP, who knows everything, and everything passes through him, so that there's a locked down, iron hard continuity for the most part. I mean, some of those novels got wacky, but and so going from Spartan, where it was like this exciting energy and freedom, but at the same time, it was maybe almost too much freedom. And then going to working for 40K, where not only was the universe already established, but the style was established, the vocabulary was established. So it was both easier because you were more channeled, and harder because you were forcing yourself into this mold at the same time.
Did you get edited copy back with a little red line saying, add more grimdark here?
You're just feeding me that because
More
for a
skulls.
fact
We want skulls.
I used to complain about that all the time. Yes, I would regularly get feedback that would say more grim dark here and things like that.
Right.
And so
seriously,
yes, 100% seriously. Yes,
See?
it's tongue in cheek. It's not like it's not like the FFG guys are seriously like this needs to be grim dark or as it would actually be in the head, grim dark. But that tongue in cheek, that's what they mean is that you need to, dirty it up a bit and keep
More
it more
skulls.
solemn.
Right.
And it's supposed to be very dark and solemn and heavy. And I worked a lot. I did a lot. I did probably, definitely over 100,000 words over the course of several years working with Fantasy Flight on several different, I worked on all but one, all but the Imperial Guard role-playing game I didn't work on, but I've worked on every other 40K property, and it was all the same sort of heavy, somber, dark, and brooding, and so it was hard to do that, while at the same time, some of it pretty much wrote itself. Some of it was, my test assignment for Fantasy Flight was to do basically the entire Eldar Codex, but the Eldar Codex already exists. And as I was doing that, all I could think in my head was like, oh, seriously, like somebody has to do this for 40K. Like every few years, somebody has to rewrite and find a different way to write that a fire dragon uses a heat weapon. And so that's what I did. And I had all these codexes to pull from. And there's a gigantic, exhaustive list of all of the approved sources for information that you can use. And it was interesting, but at the same time, it just grinds you down with the same themes and the same somber tone over and over again. And God forbid you stray into anything that's like kind of wacky and humorous. And except with the chaos you could get a little, their chaos stuff, the Fantasy Flight chaos stuff kind of harkens a little bit back to the Lost and the Damned stuff from the late 80s, early 90s. But as far as the IP was concerned, all of my stuff would then go to England. And the IP office would go over everything, and we would get it back. And I never saw those notes. My bosses saw those notes. And then I would get their, like, I don't know if they toned it down or what, but, it would be like, this guy doesn't really have or this is not, I got a chance to actually create a troop type for the Eldar that hadn't been seen in 40K. And I got at one point, this isn't how we envision this weapon working when we translate it into 40K and stuff like that. And so there you had the IP watchdogs, which again, like I said, made the job easier and at the same time maybe less rewarding. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was super exciting working for Warhammer 40,000. Don't get me wrong, because I love the universe. I've always, but interestingly enough, I have other than a slight dip back into the Horus Heresy pond, I haven't really read any 40K fluff since I did all that. Because it just gets so somber and heavy that anytime I read anything now that takes itself too seriously, I'm like, my brain shuts off.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to kind of look now at what's happening with a lot of these IPs, not maybe straying a little off topic and going outside the game world, but
right.
So many of these things have so many barnacles and things on them that you start seeing these reboots, like Star Trek. They just wiped away all this stuff and said, this is new, and I'm not going to worry about all this other stuff that happened before, or in Star Wars where they just went back and said all of these novels are no longer part of the universe,
right. Well,
and I think that, you even see that as we talked about in the Lost Chapters with the superhero shows,
right.
that, a lot of these reimaginings and people are coming back and saying, okay, I'm going to take the basic outlines, but I'm not going to be a slave to all of this stuff that came before, because I guess it ultimately limits the creativity that you can bring to something.
I think you're right. I think it happens in games too. I mean, if you look at even Games Workshop now, the big hullabaloo in the community is they're about to reboot fantasy, right? They're about to wipe out
the end times.
Yeah, so basically that's an excuse to start over, right? Or essentially, or reimagine large chunks of it. So even in games, it's happening, and I think it's really interesting to see how that's happening. And so, Geoff, you've created your own IPs, like with Space Cadets, and I want to talk about what it's like to sort of let your baby go. But have you had the opportunity to venture into other folks' IP at all?
Well, I guess I have been sanctioned to reveal here just for you guys. We've been saving this announcement.
He's going to tell,
World
Craig.
premiere announcement. Yes. He's going to tell.
He's going to tell.
No, there'll be no singing here today.
A little singing.
I have been working with Stronghold Games. I was commissioned by them, actually, to create a successor game to Survive called Survive Space Attack, where we basically take the Survive game and move it into a science fiction setting.
Awesome.
For those of you that are not familiar with Survive, first of all, you should be.
Yes, it's a great game.
awesome
Yeah, exactly
game.
right. Yeah.
It's about an island, the island of Atlantis, that's exploding and sinking into the ocean, and everyone is fleeing for safety, and you're beset upon by sharks and sea monsters and whales.
Right.
So we actually was just, kind of starting a random conversation with Steven. We were talking about some other stuff. I think we were at a con or something. I think it was right around the time when Star Trek Catan came out.
Right. Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about the Stronghold model and things like that. And we were talking about taking Space Cadets and moving it into other things. I still would love to do a Space Cadets Dice Duel pirate game, but that's instead of spaceships, pirate ships. That would just be for you, Russ.
That'd be awesome. I'm in.
But just kind of tongue in cheek, I said, you should take Survive and just start doing all kinds of crazy stuff with it, and take that and rebrand it into different things.
Yeah.
And he said, and he came back to me like 3 months later, says, I was thinking about that, and I want you to take Survive and put it in space. I want you to do that.
Nice.
But I don't want it to just be, a reskin. He says, I want it to be family friendly, still recognizable as Survive, and yet, a little bit more gamery, and people would want to own both.
Okay.
Those were the bullet points
quite a remit.
that were laid down.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I gathered the troops, i.e. the kids, and we buckled down. And, some of it was, and it was, it was a little bit scary because here's a game that's been out for, 30 years.
Right.
And it's considered, kind of I don't know if modern classic is
It's a
right,
classic.
but
Yeah,
certainly a classic game. And, you don't want to be people to think, oh, here's a hack that's just, it's just a money grab.
Right.
You want to add some content to it, but you at the same time, so you want to make it a little different. You want to put your own spin on it, but at the same time, you want to be true to the materials and what's in there.
Well, there are a couple. I mean, that's really exciting. So let me ask you this. I can't, Craig, I'm sorry, but I have to grill Geoff on this.
No, I want to hear it too.
First of all, thank you for sharing this, Geoff. This is exciting. Second of all,
very exciting.
So you mentioned it's not just a reskinning. So you're obviously going to add some very obviously it's going to have the same sort of feel, but you're going to have a few different mechanical variants. But is there any kind of thematic connection? Is this like because there's obviously theories that Atlanteans were maybe advanced technology. Had the Atlanteans left Atlantis and the survivors have now fled to a different star system?
and they had bad luck there too.
And they've had bad luck again.
No, maybe we should be hiring you to do our fluff writing. No, we did not come up with that. It's a disconnected disaster.
Or is this Space Cadets Survive?
No, it's not. It's really neither. So it's the same kind of idea except you're on a space station.
Got it. Okay.
So the tiles are all themed to look like a space station, and you are under attack by aliens, and you're trying to flee to the jump points by going into the escape pods.
So this is neat.
Now, so that part of it is basically survive. Basically survive, and you can figure out the mapping from the old one. But we wanted to add in a bunch of different things. So we very early on decided that we wanted to add little fighters that the guys could also jump into and fly around and shoot the aliens.
Cool.
We also added laser turrets on the station, so you can shoot and defend yourself.
Yeah.
You don't actually. There's just a lot more of that type of stuff going on, and we added in the original game you were only allowed to play one. As you collect tiles, they give you special things you can do sometimes. But there was a rule in the original game that you could only play one tile at a time. But what we did is we lifted that restriction so you could play as many tiles as you want, and you don't have to play them at the start of your turn. You can play them any point in your turn. So basically it sets you up to do different combos.
Oh, nice.
So if you get combinations, you can say, okay, I'm going to move this guy one thing here, and then I'm going to move this empty escape pod over to here, and then I'm going to, do these different things and play this tile. And it has that element where it gives you a little bit more tactical depth to it. But just from a design standpoint, it was really interesting. I was very happy that the original designer, Julian Cortland Smith, we didn't actually consult with him, but he did give his blessing to the whole project, and he was pretty excited about it. Which is one of my contingencies. One of the things I told Steven, I said, I am not doing this unless the original designer is happy about it. But we spent a lot of time just totally deconstructing Survive. And it was interesting because the very act of trying to redesign, trying to improve on that game made us realize what an incredibly good design it was. Because there were so many things that we tried to tweak it just a little bit and twist this and turn that, and the whole structure just kind of fell apart.
Interesting.
So it was very interesting from a game design standpoint to look at a design and say, really have to figure out how it ticks so that you don't break something and that you can build things into it so that it's even better than it was originally.
That's a really interesting sort of intellectual property constraint I hadn't really thought about before you brought this up, which is not so much you're confined in the universe of how it needs to, it needs to fit into canon, but you're confined by the fact that you want it to feel like the original game. Ideally, you'd either want to feel like it's improved, or if not improved, different but still just as great. And so the challenge you have is that because it is such a clean playing, easy to teach, yet strategically fun game with really fun player interaction, you've got to maintain that while still making it feel a little different. That's got to be pretty tough and still feel like the same game in some kind of way, right?
Right. And it was interesting because you also wanted to try to capture the feel of it. One of the first ideas that we had, and I would still love to be able to make this work, is because when you have a giant circular shaped space station, of course it looks exactly like the Death Star when it's sitting on the map.
Of course.
So our original fluff was that the people on the space station were actually the people that worked on the Death Star, and it was being attacked by rebel spaceships, and you were all just fleeing for the exits.
Right.
Jerks.
We've analyzed their attack, and there is a danger, right?
There is a danger.
And we wanted to actually, the original thing we really wanted to make work was that you could actually kind of decide sort of which side you were on, that there was a chance that with the laser turrets and stuff that you could defeat enough of the rebels that were attacking the space station. That you could save the Death Star. And the people that stayed on the Death Star and did not run for the exits got super mega bonus points.
So it's kind of like shooting the moon in spades. You could be like, okay, I'm going to go
That's
for
exactly
it.
What
stay
it was.
on for the win. That's a neat idea.
Oh, interesting.
And we actually got pretty far down that route, but it just didn't feel quite right. And ultimately what we traced it back to was the fact that you actually ran both sides, so you could like move the rebel ships and stuff like that, is that there's it's kind of a subtle difference, but we found that just the act of moving like a little fighter ship and shooting a guy floating in space or moving into space and taking him off the board.
Yeah.
If it's a shark that you're moving into space and doing that, it doesn't feel quite as bad as if you're like flying a spaceship and actually just gunning him down
shooting at these life pods.
It'd be like shooting down parachuters in World War II, right? It's just like not right.
And it just didn't have that family kind of a feel that we did. I mean, functionally, it was the same thing. The little guys came off the board, just like they do in Survive.
Right.
But the thematic tie-in, we just couldn't give it that same feeling that Survive had of lighthearted fun. It started to become a little bit too personal.
Too dark.
Yeah. So we ended up scrapping that, and now they're just like aliens. They, like little, queen aliens and warrior aliens, and, just more generic aliens.
Who come and eat
which
you.
feels a lot better. Who come and eat you. So you don't feel as badly because they look like giant bugs, so they deserve to die.
So they green, right? That's cool. That's awesome. Really cool, Geoff. So how far on the project are you guys now?
The project is actually going to the printer. There should be copies at Gen Con.
Ooh.
I'm not sure if they will be for sale, but the tentative street date right now is September. If Gen Con was when Gen Con used to be, we almost certainly would have had copies there, but Gen Con is now at the end of July, so it's going to be a little bit tight, but we'll certainly have some pre-production copies ready to go. So
very cool.
We've been working on the art and the little fighter jets and laser turrets, and there's a lot of really great wooden bits in this thing. So I'm really excited about it.
I like hearing that.
Yeah, I'm on that. Just shut up and take my money, Geoff. Pretty much there. That looks awesome. That sounds great.
That sounds
really
great.
cool.
So we're excited, and it's, it was interesting because this is the first time every other design that we've done has been totally in our own playground. This is the first time that we've got to play in somebody else's sandbox, and it was both interesting creatively because, creativity I think comes from constraints to a large extent, forcing you to work inside a box. You don't want to be so stulted, that there's so many constraints on what you need to do that it's got to be exactly the same. But sometimes just having a completely blank piece of paper can kind of freak you out.
Right.
It absolutely can.
All right, cool. So, let's talk a little bit about the other side of this coin. So we've talked now about having to build stuff inside other people's houses, but both of you have been involved very heavily in creating your own sort of IPs. And Craig, you worked on Wild West Exodus, and that was sort of the brainchild.
I wouldn't take credit for that IP because they'd send a person after me to shoot me.
No. I mean, obviously it was the brainchild of them, but you created a lot of new characters in there, and then you had to pass those characters off to another author.
Indeed.
Who was allowed to then do things with your children, essentially.
Yes, that is exactly how it feels.
And can you describe, how did you become the lore? Well, so you were the lore master for that for a while, right? And you were on the other side of the thing?
Well, the problem is, no. The lore master is a little red book that I've never actually gotten a chance to see.
Oh, interesting.
That apparently exists somewhere. And I for the first year labored under the misconception that it was written in stone and that what I was told in 1 year would be the same in the next year. And then I had a meeting that was like a year and a half later going, oh, that's not how those work. And I went, whoa, I've got news for you in case you haven't been reading your own books. That is how they work. So, I was the lore master. Now I'm a lore master. Mm-hmm. As things expand, and now there's I wrote all of the original fluff, and it was Romeo was the guy who had all the information, and he would brief me, and then I would write stories about the things that he wanted me to write stories about, and the people that he wanted me to write stories about, and I would create all the supporting characters that would create a story in which his characters would be showcased.
Yeah.
But all those supporting characters were mine. And I enjoyed doing that, and that was a lot of fun. And it was kind of like the sweet spot for me between 40K and Spartan Games, where I had a lot of freedom at the same time. There was enough constraint, as Geoff said, it really helps creativity to instead of just like for instance, I'm having all kinds of issues writing my own novel. There's nobody there to tell me these guys should be here at the end. So I'm like, oh, in fact, this week I have completely scrapped the last 8 chapters of my novel and redone the entire outline because I had completely forgotten what the outline said. And I was like, oh, I feel really good about this. And in my head, I had this whole thing, and I thought I knew exactly what I was planning. And then I've now gotten to the climax of the book, and I'm like, oh, let me read ahead a couple chapters. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And so I took a whole day. I lost a day of writing to rewrite the last 8 chapters worth of outline because I've got no one to tell me. So whereas the Wild West Exodus stuff goes, I've got Romeo saying, okay, this is going to be a story about these 3 characters, and I want them to have these kinds of experiences. I want it to be reminiscent of this sort of thing. And by the end, this is how they have to end up because this is the new model for the miniature. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, I have a very fixed point, and that's where I'm heading. So I've done 4 of those novels, and 4 of those novels, they get easy. Knock on wood. I don't want to say they get easier each time, but I enjoy them more each time as I kind of feel my way through and I'm creating. And so I did over 100,000 words of the rule book, all short stories. Then I did a novel, and for whatever reason, and I promised never to hold a grudge for this, but they wanted to start with a trilogy. And listeners know all about the story where they hired another person to come in and write the middle book of a trilogy. And I wrote the first and the last book of a trilogy, which makes it very difficult for me to explain when I talk to people who don't know what's going on. And it was extremely difficult because, the other guy, just by the very nature, it's another human being. They're going to have a different style. Mm-hmm. They're going to, read theoretically, if they're doing their due diligence, my stuff and then take away from it different things than I thought when I was writing it. And so communicate, I would say all the same rules that I talked about when we were talking about Spartan Games and Fantasy Flight, all the same rules still apply. Communication is key. Having a person who's going to be the gatekeeper is key. And so there was no gatekeeper, so I became the de facto gatekeeper, and it ended up being a huge, like, it ended up fine. It ended up being a nice trilogy with, a story arc, and everything worked out fine. But it ended up being a huge issue at one point where everything just fell apart, and the whole publishing schedule that had necessitated, in somebody else's mind, bringing in another person to do the middle book was totally blown out of the water, and the series didn't get published until far later anyway. And I had to go in and I had to actually work with them to rewrite. And I didn't rewrite any of it. None of it is mine. I don't want to take credit for anything that I didn't do, but there was a lot that needed to be rewritten in that middle book. And so it was very, very painful to me in the initial stages to read it going, well, that's not how that works. And that's not how, that's not what this guy would say. And to that level, I had to leave it alone. I mean, for that book, it's his book, and he's just as much of a creative person as and an author as I am. And so once the decision is made, it was a very hard decision for me to live with, and it was a long road for me to get to where I am now. But that book is his book. It can't be him writing as me. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, and that was extremely difficult. And that was a hard lesson for me to learn, where I would read it and I'd be like, that's not the way this guy talks, or that's not what he was wearing. And so physical stuff we had to streamline, and that's when they brought in Dropbox. And now I just have, it takes up half my computer, this enormous Wild West Exodus Dropbox file that has all of the artwork and all the concept art going for 3 years into the future, so that anytime I write about a character now, I can pull up exactly what that model looks like, exactly what the concept art looks like, and we all know, what that person in general is wearing. What color duster is Jesse James wearing, for instance. But it was extremely difficult. It was very, very difficult for me, and frustrating, because I wasn't approaching it with as open a mind and as accepting a mind as you need to have. I was like, no, this is my first book. No, it's mine. And it wasn't mine. I mean, when you're working with an IP, ultimately it's not yours.
Right.
And just, if I can just segue just a moment into legalities, contracts that you have to sign when you're working on these IPs, for Fantasy Flight, for 40K, for Star Wars, and now for Wild West Exodus, they're explicit in what I would assume would be something everybody knows, which is nothing you write here is yours.
Right.
You're never going to, even if it's a character I made up for Wild West Exodus, I'm not going to leave Wild West Exodus and write a novel about that character.
Right.
I'm not going to, anything that I make that somebody says, oh yeah, that's pretty cool for Star Wars, that's not mine anymore. That belongs to that IP. So anytime you're working under that IP umbrella, all of the work, all of the brainstorming, all the stuff you create is not going to be yours. Now, if that bothers you, then you're going into the wrong, then you're going about this all wrong, and you need to just start writing your own book right from the beginning. That part never bothered me, except when I was like, I don't want to own it. I just want it to be the same. I want somebody to jump in there and be me. And that's obviously that, once, like I said, once the decision was made to bring in another writer, that has to be his project. He has to have, the freedom to make that his own, because I think the ultimate problem that I have in any of these jobs is when someone, and it's happened in almost all of them at one point or another, someone treats you like a monkey, like a trained writing monkey. And they're like, I want you to do A, B, and C, and that's exactly what it's going to be. And you're like, okay, that where you're given no freedom.
Right.
And
I need to get some of those trained writing monkeys. Do you know where we can get those?
Yeah, well, I happen to be one.
Oh,
on my odd days.
So, Geoff, did you go through sort of the same sort of experience that Craig did, where you built, you and your family actually, came up with the two
family affair,
the Space Cadets games, right? So you came up with Space Cadets, and then later Space Cadets Dice Duel, and those games, they had a certain look and feel in terms of obviously. Sort of how they played and the concept that you're cadets, and sort of the certain kind of mechanics and a kind of gameplay. And now, the Kickstarter just wrapped up for Space Cadets Away Team, which is another Stronghold Games production, but you guys aren't doing the rules.
I need to correct you. Space Cadets Away Missions.
Oh, sorry, Away Missions.
We had a choice between two horrible acronyms. Space Cadets Away Missions or Space Cadets Away Team. And after massive diligence and deliberation, we went with Away Missions. So
I see.
Take that as you will.
Or scat. See,
Hunters, beware.
Hunters, don't step in it. So thank you for the correction there, Geoff. So how involved were you? How did that whole process go down, and how involved were you, and how comfortable were you? These kind of, I mean, I know obviously, as Craig mentioned, the legalities are, it's obviously a Stronghold Games IP, but how did you feel about the whole process?
Well, it was a little bit different for us than for Craig. I think, well, probably a lot different in many ways, because one of the things about Space Cadets is that it doesn't have a huge fluff and backstory. Mm-hmm. You know, we were so wrapped up in the mechanics and getting all the artwork and all that stuff straightened out that we just didn't have time to really put together something. We had plans for campaign missions that were going to explain some of the universe, and all the missions were going to tie together in an overarching story and stuff like that, but we couldn't get to it. So the background fluff for both Space Cadets and Dice Duel is thin, admittedly. Mm-hmm. Other than I think the brand in essence stands for more of a type of gameplay, that idea that you're working cooperatively as a team and things are a little bit out of control, or sometimes a lot out of control. So I think that's more of what ties it together. So, Stephen came to me and said, I've been working with these guys. I've got this game I think would be terrific for the Space Cadets line, but, I just wanted to make sure that you're okay with it, which was, as Craig noted, extremely nice of Stronghold, because they, legally, if I had said no, they could have said, well, it doesn't matter. We're going to do it.
It's very nice. And that kind of courtesy is huge. It cannot be understated how important that kind of courtesy is in a collaborative environment.
Right. So so I checked with the family, and we were all, very flattered that somebody else would want to come play in our sandbox to a certain extent, and that that somebody felt that there was enough goodwill associated with that it would make a difference to have that associated with it. Now, the issue that we had once they started is that the guys, unlike us, the two gentlemen who had designed Away Missions had done a huge amount of fluff, right? They had a lot of background material, and they were in love with this whole 50s sci-fi golden age of sci-fi sort of look. It's the Rocket Patrol.
Yeah, like Flash Gordon type stuff. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So it's all around that brains in jars and ray guns, and it's all that aesthetic. Whereas Space Cadets is really a 60s
Star
almost,
Trek-ish.
60s, 70s Star Trek aesthetic. Right. That's got a very different feel. So the way we ultimately kind of reconcile that is we left the original Away Mission stuff kind of the way it was, but said that this was like the early stages of Space Cadets. We had called it Space Command is what we call it in Space Cadets. So we said it started as Rocket Patrol, and then, now once they invented the jump drive, then it became Space Command, and it moved into this other kind of future world. So this is almost like a prequel. So Space Cadets.
So keeping with then the stringent and rigidly detailed background fluff of Space Cadets, it wouldn't be appropriate then to play Space Cadets Dice Duel and then pretend in the same universe you were landing on a planet and then playing Away Mission.
The fluff police will come and arrest you.
It would be incorrect, right?
Exactly.
I would be in the time.
However, what it was interesting because Away Missions, that whole thing got signed right around the time when we were designing the Space Cadets expansion. Mm-hmm. Which ultimately was released as Resistance is Mostly Futile. And, one of the big things we wanted to do is include a whole bunch of new missions. And we had designed like 3 or 4, but we were a little stuck. We just, for some reason, the creativity just wasn't coming to us to create a bunch of new missions that didn't just feel repetitive. And then, this whole thing happened with the Rocket Patrol stuff. And I said, and I read their fluff, and I was kind of inspired by their fluff about flying between the solar systems and stuff like that. And each of the missions in Away Missions takes place on a different planet in the solar system. The first one is Mercury, and they go all the way out to Jupiter or Saturn is the last mission. And, I was, and in all of their stuff really is around what happens on the planets, but they allude to these different actions and things that happen in between, that they fought the alien spaceships and stuff like that in between, but it's not really a part of their game. And I was looking at it, I said, what would be cool is if we could include, to try to tie this together in the Space Cadets expansion, to include missions that take place in these interstitial things between the away missions as spaceships. And just having that idea, and then I ran it by everybody at Stronghold interviewed. Everyone was very excited about it. And, so we ended up creating what we called the historical missions, which kind of, there was a lot of fluff in that, and it pulled in from the fluff from away team and away missions. See, now I'm doing it. And,
my bad.
And we dummied down the ships. Like, we took out the jump drives and we made the weapons a little bit weaker. We put in a whole bunch of new enemies that are only used in historical missions that have, that reflected what it was. So for us, it actually inspired our creativity by saying, okay, I was really happy with it because it creates like a bridge now between these two, worlds. One in the much more far future where you're zipping around the galaxy, and one that's just constrained to our solar system, and it just kind of made it, to me, feel much more real in a much bigger world. In addition to having the happy side effect of unleashing the creativity to come up with I think we put in 4 or 5 or 6 historical missions.
Nice.
So
that's very cool.
So it's a kind of a different sort of a story.
That's a very cool story. It's neat to see that, when people join in and it makes the sum becomes greater than its parts. All of a sudden you've got a really cool universe that's got neat crossovers, and everything makes it better. That's really cool.
And and what that kind of underscores is that, like I said, the collaborative element of that creative process, where they're creating stuff and then it's getting your juices flowing, so you're creating stuff, and that, to me, that's the ideal environment to work in when you're talking about creativity, whether it's game design or writing. It's having somebody there to sort of guide you along, and at the same time you've got the leeway to really bounce your ideas off and start building your own stuff within the structure of what you're working on, which is great.
Exactly right. So well, I think that was interesting, and thanks for taking the time to share those. And Geoff, thank you very much for giving us that little
peek
into
super exciting news.
Into the new. So what's the name of it again? The new. You guys have a name nailed down yet?
Survive Space Attack.
Space Attack. I like it.
We actually had a lot of trouble coming with the name. That name was actually was given to us by my 7-year-old nephew. So we played the game. He was our test bed for making sure it was family friendly and had fun and everything, and still played it. So
did he cry? Did he cry when you were killing the guys with fighters? Was that the issue?
Oh no. He was.
I would imagine a 7-year-old would be like, woohoo!
That was more for the parent sensibilities,
right?
I think,
Exactly.
For the kids.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I love it. It's a perfect name for that kind of a game, and because Survive Escape from Atlantis is sort of the same sort of title, which is awesome. So, well, speaking of IPs, up later this very episode, we are going to review up next. Actually, after we hear from Total Fangirl and Hollywood, we're going to review XCOM, the board game, the cooperative board game, which is pretty exciting. And one of the challenges, as you guys just pointed out, is, as Geoff was saying, trying to build Survive Space Attack, it has to sort of feel like Survive if it's going to have part of the Survive name. And so one of the things we're going to be asking ourselves in this review, right, is does XCOM, the board game, feel like its namesake? Does it feel like the game of XCOM? I'll have to stay tuned.
would never know.
You'll know. Well,
I'll trust you.
You will be told.
You'll be told. Right.
I will be told what I think, and I am okay with that.
Right.
This is Total Fangirl. Regular Jane most days, total fangirl when the moment strikes. Han shot first. Starbuck is a guy. And Lestat, now there's a vampire. Hey everyone, this is Nicole, your Total Fangirl. You can follow me on Twitter at Nicole Wakeland and check out my blog, TotalFangirl.com. This time our shout out is, surprise, surprise, to all of our wonderful supporters over at Patreon. Head to patreon.com/the D6 Generation and you too can support the show. This weekend was the weekend we finally had my 11-year-old daughter's epic Dungeons and Dragons all-nighter birthday party. She wanted to channel her inner teenager and stay up all night and never go to sleep unless they actually passed out cold and play D&D. This would be her sister, her 2 cousins, her uncle, and Russ acting as the DM through the whole thing. Now, this wasn't really that hard for me because my responsibilities during this event consisted of ordering pizza and baking something called fondue bread, which is like this really cheesy, yummy bread that you make from scratch that Russ loves, and so does my daughter. So that's all I had to do. Russ, on the other hand, had to be up all night. I mean, he's the DM. He is up all night. He had to plan this huge campaign, have all this epicness ready for the kids so that they could stay up till the wee hours because, well, we honestly had no idea. Would they make it till 10? Would they make it till midnight? Would they make it till 2? It was a mystery. So they were having a wonderful time. All sorts of dragon slaying happening downstairs at our house. And I went to bed about 11 o'clock while the dragon slaying was happening, and I happily went to bed, and Russ Wakeland happily stayed awake and guided everyone along. And it was so late when he got to bed that I didn't even remember him getting into the bed, which when I woke up in the morning, I thought that's a really bad sign for him having gotten any sleep because normally he wakes me up just getting into that bed and I didn't even hear him. I was so sound asleep. He was sound asleep Sunday morning. So was everybody else. I could hear the children snoring downstairs in the game room. I just hear this like in varying levels coming from all the kids. And it was like 8:30, 9 o'clock. These are kids who are normally up at the butt crack of dawn, but no, they were still asleep. Eventually I went down and there were 2 sleepy children awake, and then there were 2 sleepier children who were still sleeping, and they eventually managed to all wake up, and we had a wonderful morning. Made homemade apple skivers for breakfast, which is more yummy baked goodness. And oh yeah, eventually Russ actually crawled out of bed too, and I said to him, so how late did you make it last night? And he said, I think we went to bed a little after 3. I said, they made it till after 3 o'clock? And he shook his head and said, no, they didn't. I said, but you said you played after 3. What, did they, like, half of them fall asleep and you just kept playing? He said, no, the kids were totally fine. My brother was falling asleep at the table, so John had them call it. So what actually happened was the kids were ready to keep going. 3 o'clock in the morning, and they had kept right on playing. And what shut it all down was my sleepy brother-in-law, which they might all be complaining about, but in truth, I think Russ is actually pretty grateful it didn't go any longer.
Hey, now it's time to talk about our friends at GeekNationTours.com.
Yeehaw!
Yeah, that's right.
I have no idea what yeehaw goes for.
Well,
yeah.
It means...
Well, they do all kinds of Wild West stuff, too.
Yeah, but this year, Gen Con's in July, Craig. Getting earlier every year.
Gen Con is getting earlier every year.
And if you want to get there, that means it's getting close. It's,
That's true.
3 months away. That's close.
Almost
people.
everything is sold out.
And that means that the tour is closing any minute now.
That's right.
Like
if you want to get
away.
in on all the cool stuff and get a really good hotel room still, there's almost only one way to go.
Why fight the crazy at Gen Con trying to get the hotel room, find which event should I go to, which events not should I go to, should I get generic tickets, where should I eat, how do I get a couple games in before the convention starts? Do I even know anybody in Indianapolis? Where are the cool places to go when I'm not at the con?
Well, to answer all of these questions and more, Russ, you go with Geek Nation Tours.
Absolutely right. Terrace and the boys hook
Terrace
you up.
is going to show you where to eat.
How about having dinner
with?
How about have dinner with Craig and I, man? We're there the opening night. Geek Nation Tours is a great dinner. We're there. Other podcasts, game designers are there. Famous last year, Ensign Kim was chillaxing with us. You never know who's going to be at these events. So check it out. You're going to get the royal treatment if you go with Geek Nation Tours. So check on over. Head over to geeknationtours.com. Click on upcoming tours to check out the Gen Con tour and all the other great events.
Yep.
I'm Rafe Hollywood Granger, and this is the Hollywood Minute.
Hello! Welcome to another edition of the Hollywood Minute. I'm your host, Rafe Hollywood Granger. You can follow me on the Twitter on the D6G Hollywood or my website, the D6GHollywood.com. Today's topic of interest is talking all things Prison Architect. Found on Steam, playable on the PC by Introversion Software. Guys out of England somewhere, at least according to the accent. I'm no expert. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong. This is a prison building sim, but playable and a type of sim that I've never played before, and I absolutely love it. Along with loving it is Dave Farr from the Nerd Herbers, and Andy is meh on it. What do I like about this game? First of all, it was a Kickstarter. And they've been producing updates ever since. I think I joined around Alpha 12 or something like that. They're currently up to Alpha 21, I think. Nope, I take that back. Alpha 31. It's still considered an alpha, but frankly, I consider it a fully playable game. I don't encounter any bugs. It could be because I started playing it way early in the alpha series, and I did not like it then. By the way, nothing about the game at all. I could tell the game was awesome. What I didn't like was not knowing how to play the game and then not knowing if I was just doing something wrong or if it was a bug. Now, if I don't know how something's working, I just Google it. There's tons of wikis, there's wikias, and I just follow the instructions on there, and then I go back to the game and it works like a charm. So the game is, picture it being like Sim City, but instead of your little Sims just running around doing, things, and then there's a meter and you can tell if they're happy or sad. In this game, the Sims act as a different type of AI. There is a needs chart. You need to know if they're happy. You need to know if their bowels are good, their bladder is good. That reminds me of a funny story. You set their regime of what their lockdown is like. You can't control the Sims themselves. The little micro Sims, they run around, they do their own thing. You can scroll in, you can scroll out. So I had this situation where their bowels were high, and I have bathrooms and a toilet in every cell. So I'm like, what is going on? So I decided just on a whim to throw toilets in the showers. No walls, no nothing. Just lined up a bunch of toilets, connected the plumbing to them, and then when it was shower time, all the prisoners came rushing out of their cells, ran into the shower, and just literally sat on the toilets, and you can see their little heads moving around and stuff like that. It was hilarious to me, and I watched the indicator for bowel and bladder just go and shrink right down. I don't know why I think that's fun. I guess I just think that's hilarious. So it's a top-down view. It's a building game. You're building cell blocks. You're building yards for them to exercise in. You're building a power plant. You're building offices. You hire staff. You have to hire an accountant, chief of guard, the chief of staff. The level of depth for this game is just incredible. And, it's like any other sim. There's different grants you can do. If you build a cell block, if you build a maximum security cell block, you get money. But what I've been enjoying doing is I've built a minimum security prison. So, you can detail what kind of prisoners you want to get in. I have minimum and medium security. And I enjoy, rather than cramming it full of prisoners, I enjoy trying to get everything to work so harmoniously that I never have a problem. So anytime there's a need, like right now there's a need for literacy. So I had to jump through a bunch of different hoops in order to get them to be taught education classes. So I enjoy doing that. And what's hilarious is I was off and running, kind of focusing on, I think I was rearranging the kitchen and the canteen a little bit where the prisoners eat, and all of a sudden I see this like fire in my upper left-hand screen. So I go look up there and I'm like, what the heck? Oh, by the way, the prisoners, you don't see this. They steal contraband. They steal scissors, they steal saws, screwdrivers, they steal lighters, drugs. you can have your guards do shakedowns and try to discover the stuff. So the only thing I can imagine is there was somebody in my parole board. You can actually set up parole hearings with a parole lawyer and a staff member, and I think the parole must not have gone down right, because next thing I know, the parole room is completely on fire. So you see these little fireballs, and it starts eating the floor, eating the walls, and that's bad, because if they eat the walls to the outside, your prisoners are gone. So I'm like, I've never seen that before. So I'm kind of looking around the menu. What do? I find the emergency tab. I click that. I call the fire department. Four fire sims come racing in, fire trucks. I figure out how to get them over to the fire. Meanwhile, the fire's eating up, like, picture 1 square is 5 by 5. I've probably got like 15 squares on fire now. And I'm like, So I direct the firemen over there, and I look back, and the next thing I know, I've got dead bodies everywhere. I got 3 dead firemen. The doctor ran over to heal prisoners and firemen, and the 2 doctors died. I lost that. I lost the parole lawyer, the staff member, 2 prisoners. I had 1 fireman left when I figured out how to operate his hose. So I'm operating his hose. I'm putting out the fire. The fire's growing. I'm like, okay. This is what I love about the game. What happens next? The game / the prisoners took this time to stage a riot. They used this distraction to stage a riot where they kill another prisoner. And I'm like, why did they do that? And I hover, I quell that, I get that quelled. You hit a button called bang up, and all the guards immediately activate, and all the prisoners have to go to their cells. I'm like, why'd they do that? And you can hover over the prisoner, and it tells you what its needs are. How's its bowels? How's its bladder? How's its literacy? How's its freedom? Does it want to be educated? So on and so forth. I hover over it, and it says snitch. So the prisoners took the distraction of the fire to stage a riot to kill a snitch. And ever since that, I mean, that's 60 hours in, I'm playing this game, so I was hooked before then. But ever since that, I'm like, this is the greatest AI thinking I've ever encountered. And it's cartoony. To me, the little Sims are cartoony, so the violence doesn't upset me. It's not too real at all. It's pretty much just a sim with prisoners. So for me, I'm finding it to be a blast. If you want to get started with it, the tutorial, if you find the webpage, they're beginning tutorials from like alpha way back. It's better off to do a YouTube search for anything like alpha 25 and above. How to play Prison Architect on YouTube, alpha 25 and up, because that'll show you the most recent twists and turns to the game and the add-ons and so on and so forth. If you think you like it and you see it, then you want to run over to Steam or get it directly from Introversion software. I have it through Steam, and you just buy it through Steam. And like I said, I find it to be 100% fullable, playable game, and they're still calling it an alpha. So, it's not even in beta yet. So I do warn you there. And they will say it's not a finished game, but they do at least monthly updates, different upgrades, and they do a video post, and you can see all that on their page over there where they do their update posts. I think it's a YouTube channel, frankly, to be honest. So yeah, I just wanted to tell you a little bit. What I want to do is get Dave on the air, so to speak, and he and I can kind of have a conversation back and forth about what he likes about Prison Architect, what I like about Prison Architect. And so I just wanted to get that out there. Enjoy it. I'm having a good time with it. Again, if you want to follow me on the Twitter, the D6G Hollywood on Twitter, or the D6Hollywood.com. Until then, happy gaming.
This is the Dice Tower Network at Dicetowernetwork.com.
Hey, welcome back. And now, Jeff's here, and, it's time to go sci-fi, Geoff.
Yay.
Now, XCOM's been out a little while now. Came out early this year, right? XCOM, the board game. And now you are would you consider yourself an XCOM aficionado from the PC genre?
Yes.
You played a lot of XCOM in your day?
I played almost all the XCOM games, going all the way back to the original one.
Me too. Me too. I love XCOM. What a great game. And so, were you as excited as I was when we heard that the XCOM Fantasy Flight board game was being built?
Yes. I was very excited, and I went to like 2 shows where it was being demoed and kept trying to get and sit down at a table to try it, and things kept pulling me away. So I was I was very excited when I finally was able to get a copy from my friendly local gaming store and give it a whirl.
Yeah, so let's going to talk a little bit about XCOM here and how this thing works. It's a little unusual, so we're going to get into that. Now, Craig, so I've played like 3 games now. Jeff, you've played, 3 or 4 games also?
Yeah, about 4 games. Yeah.
And Craig has not even seen...
I walked by a game being played.
Craig was in proximity. Right.
He's game adjacent.
So Craig's going to play game adjacent. He's adjacent, which is defined as orthogonally adjacent, not diagonally adjacent. So we'll get into
that
this.
That just hurt my brain.
Yeah, see, that's an important way to say that, because so many games you have to ask yourself, okay, does the adjacent count when you're diagonal? So I've learned the term orthogonally adjacent, which just makes it easier.
That's like made it into the local lexicon over the last few months.
See, these are the kind of effects I have on humanity. That's what I do. All right, so what was interesting about, so let's get the high level of this thing. It's a 1 to 4 player co-op game. But I'm going to tell you right now, this is clearly designed for 4 players. Anything less than 4 players, your experience will be dampened, in my opinion. I don't know, Jeff, maybe your mileage may vary on that, but that's
yeah, to a certain extent. But it's you get assigned roles, so somebody will fill in the missing gaps. So even if you have fewer than 4 players, it's as if there were 4 people, but people will be doing more than one job.
Someone's doing more work, and I think it takes a little bit away from it. But anyway, obviously, Fantasy Flight Games published this baby in 2015 here, earlier this year. It says it's about 90 minutes long, and that's been my experience, Jeff. Have you found the time to be about right?
Yeah, I think that's about right. It can even go faster, I think, once people know what they're doing, or if they lose horribly like we tend to.
Yeah, I think if you really drive the timer system, we'll talk about that later, you get this thing played pretty quick. And due to the timed nature of the game, it doesn't generally go long, although there is this little pause moment called the resolution phase where you get to kind of take a breath and see what happens. And of course, during that phase, you could slow down a bit. But actually, most of the tactical thinking happens in a timed moment, so there's not really much analysis paralysis that can really occur, which is sort of interesting. Now, one interesting thing about this game, and some might think it's a gimmick, Craig, but a game requires an iOS device, an Android device, or a PC. So you need some form of digital doohickey because the game is designed to work with an app. Now, the good news is they did make an app for all the platforms, including PC. And even the PC one's got a nice touch interface, so you can run it on your Surface or a tab or any kind of PC variant tablet, and it works pretty well. There's even a web-based version, so you can download nothing. You just run on the web and it goes. Although I don't know if you tried this, Jeff. If you run the web version and your browser closes or crashes, you lose your stuff.
Oh, really?
If you're running it on iOS or Android and it crashes, you can just reboot the app and it remembers where it was. So
I will make a minor complaint about it, the app, which is that it does not run in landscape mode on my iPad. You have to run it in portrait mode, and that doesn't work with my stand. So it makes life so difficult.
It does.
It's a true masked problem for me that I can't have my tablet in landscape mode.
First world problem. And one thing too, it does definitely play best on a larger screen, meaning a tablet or ideally if you had a large PC touchscreen nearby, like on a Windows, that'd be great. But that one's fine on iPad. It does work fine on your phone, but I find the phone a little cramped for the amount of information they're displaying. So I prefer the tablet. Anyway, so Craig, would you be so kind to give us a dramatic reading of the sort of what's on the back of the box here?
Okay. Where the world's militaries have failed to stand against the alien invaders, you must succeed. To do so, you must make strategic use of the resources available to you. You must launch interceptors to shoot down alien UFOs, assign soldiers to key missions, research alien technology, and use that technology to defend your base. All while trying to keep the world from collapsing just long enough that you can coordinate one final mission to repel the invaders for good. $60. Oh, wait.
Thank you, Craig. Yes.
Sorry about that. Sorry.
And that's exactly what you're doing. So you're in control of XCOM. Now, one thing about this theme, for those of you who are familiar with XCOM, what makes the XCOM board game great is it's actually a tactical squad simulator, right? So it's sci-fi squad command, squad leader. There is an element to the there's a mini game though in the computer game, which is between your squad missions. You are organizing this base, this tactical operations base, and there's a map of the globe, and you're seeing where the UFOs are landing, and you're dispatching fighters to intercept the UFOs. But that's just sort of a side game onto the main game, which is the actual tactical squad combat. The interesting thing about this board game is it's actually the side game. So the board game you're playing is the XCOM side game. It's not the main. This is not a tactical squad game, right, Geoff?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. It's a higher level look. You're dispatching resources.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, gosh, one person's in charge of the budget. That's their whole job.
Right.
So it's very much focused on that high level kind of strategic command look.
It's strategic command. And it is $60. And let's find out if it's worth it, what's in the box. So what is in the box is a beautiful, not a surprise, Fantasy Flight game board. You get 12 of these really cool, very detailed plastic XCOM soldiers. Now, you don't actually have any tactical combat. They look really cool, and they're not quite 28 millimeter. They're more like the size of miniatures and like Descent maybe, but they're just used to mark which missions the guys are on. There's no actual, like, I'm going to flank them or anything like that. You also get 8 cool little XCOM interceptors, look just like the cool jets from the video game. You get 24 cool little plastic UFOs, which invade all over the world, because the board's basically a giant world map. So what you're really doing is watching for where the UFOs are landing and where the people are panicking and things like that. You've got 5 of these fancy custom XCOM dice, and you got tons and tons of its Fantasy Flight. So lots of cards, lots of tokens, and all that kind of stuff. Geoff, what did you think about the component quality?
I was happy with the components. I thought they did a really nice job with it. I thought the minis were good. Not that I typically paint my miniatures, but I didn't feel super compelled like I would want to paint these. Mm-hmm. I like the UFOs are in a different color, and they form these nice little stacks, which gives me I like playing with the pieces and forming little stacks and things during the game to keep myself occupied. So I like the fact that the flying saucers stack up into big piles. Yeah,
I do like the colors, the artwork on all the components and the cards and the board. The board's got that sort of glowy blue sort of hologram feel like you get from the giant rotating globe in the video game.
Yep.
Because the fluff in the video game is there's a giant, in the command room, there's this giant rotating holographic globe. And so the board looks like that.
Yeah, and it totally follows through with the app. The app has that exact same aesthetic, and they did a really nice job with the graphics on the app.
Yep, and the UFOs are that nice bright red plastic, so even without painting them, you see that, and all the guys and the jets are all the sort of the military plastic gray there. And I do also like how the UFOs stack, so as some of the smaller countries get full of UFOs, you can just kind of stack them up and see that there's 4 there. That's not good. So it's really, it looks great. I think the presentation's great. When people walk by, the board's set up along with your iPad in a stand and the cool sort of matching color code. You do stop and go, oh, that looks interesting. You definitely can't help but stop. So is it worth $60 though, Geoff?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable price point for this game, given the stuff.
Yeah, when you're still dropping $40 for a card game, I think you with the models and the plastics here, you don't. Yeah. It's probably got an air of overproduction. You definitely don't need the plastic miniatures, but it does make the experience a little more fun and a little more visual. And given that it's a co-op game, I really like that element. It makes it feel like you're really commanding little dudes. So
yeah,
I like
and there's nice little features like on the minis. I guess we'll talk about this later, but when you upgrade them to elites, they got a little slot where you can stick a little elite tag thing on them.
That's right.
So there's little things like that.
So now here's the other thing you're going to find in the box. You're going to find a rule. Well, I don't want to call it a booklet. A 2-page rule pamphlet. And when I say it's really one of those pamphlets that folds open, the front page is purely an introduction. The second page is just pictures of components. The third page is how you set the game up and scoring. And the final page is a picture of the board all set up. There are actually absolutely no actual game rules in the rules booklet. And how this is designed to work is all of the rules in their entirety are in the app.
Well, and they're not even really in the app.
Not really.
I gotta ding the game for
Go
this.
for it. Jump in. Go. Get him in.
I was not happy about. Mainly because, when I got the game and I first started looking at it, I did not have access to the app and I did not have access to internet or anything. So I was just kind of stuck and I was just looking at the pieces and not able to figure out how the game played.
So the game can't be played without the app?
No.
The game cannot be played. Absolutely cannot be played without the app, and cannot be learned without the app.
That's right.
Oh.
But the other thing is that the way they teach it is the first mission that you do is a tutorial that kind of steps you through the first 2 turns and teaches the rules as you go. But there are no rules, and then there's a button in the app that says rules. Okay, but if you hit that button, it's basically just a glossary.
It's a glossary, yeah. Right.
And then it just lists terms, and you can tap it, and it tells you what it is. But in no place is there actually like rules that explain things? And we ran into some questions that were not answered by the glossary, were not answered, by the tutorial. And you're just stuck. You have no place to go. We end up having to go online and trying to research and ask some people. And I was not happy about that. I think that at a very minimum, they should have written a real rule book and put it in the app. And to put a real rule book, a 12-page rule book, it costs like 20 cents or whatever to throw one in the box. I don't know what they were trying to accomplish by not having any rules at all in the book, in the box. And certainly, at a minimum of having them on the app so that you could read through them and, find the relevant sections rather than just trying to figure stuff out through the limited glossary that was included.
I completely agree, Geoff. I think they were, I'm guessing the vision was, wouldn't it be cool to have a game that just taught you it as you played and it wouldn't need to be a rule book? But really, it's really hard to assess if you want to buy the game. So many of us now are used to the fact I can go to the Fantasy Flight website, download the PDF file, read about the game, and say, oh my God, this is awesome, I'm going to buy it. The second part is Fantasy Flight's been doing such a good job lately with their games where they have this whole new format, right, where you get the learning booklet and then you get the reference booklet, right? Like if you look at Armada and Imperial Assault and some others.
Yeah, Imperial Assault is like 4 rule books.
Right.
They should just taken one out of there and put it into XCOM instead.
Right. But the way that you're right, the way the app presents it, the only real way to learn the game, because you're right, the rules are presented in tutorial mode, which walks you through like actually playing the game. And the only way to learn the game before you play it with your friends, you don't sit down with them and say, okay, we're all going to learn together, I know what I'm doing, is you really need to play it solo mode in the tutorial mode and then walk through the game once yourself. Set the whole thing up and play it solo, which you can do, but it's very hard to absorb it that way. And like if you wanted to, oftentimes when I play a game, I go back to the rules afterwards and flip through and find all the things I did wrong, because Lord knows I do a lot of things wrong. And there's no way to do that either. You just got to play it again. And really, you're right, Geoff. I wish if they're going to put it on the app, they could at least throw a PDF file in there that's formatted like a book that I could read through in my spare time. So,
and in a tutorial, if you like missed something in a step, you got to go back to the previous step so you can read it. And
the other thing you noticed is that the app is always in portrait mode or portrait mode. So you can't flip the landscape, and it's just one giant scrolling text. And so they've got some pages in there when it's the tutorial of like 4 or 5 or 6 screens of text that's all glommed together in a bad format. You can't zoom out like a PDF or a book document. So it's actually, the good news is the game's not that complex to learn, but it feels very intimidating because you're scrolling through these walls of text on your phone or your tablet, and you can't really get your head around, do I really know what's going on here, until you play it once. So the good news is I played it once, I figured it out. It wasn't that hard. But yeah, I'm with you, Geoff. I wish there was just at least a small book that had a sample turn or two in it or something to kind of walk you through the process.
Because it's not super complex, so it's learnable that way. But even us, experienced gamers, we had enough questions that it tripped us up. And it's not. I was just disappointed. It's not that much additional money for them to put something like that in there. It's not too much to ask for a game to come with rules.
Agreed. I think so too, especially for $60. Give me a rule book.
Sort of basic.
Yeah, right. So anyway, so just be under. And now the weird thing,
and that's a professor of gaming talking.
That's right.
That's right.
That's what NYU says. Geoff,
Lesson number 1. I've got the first item for your syllabus.
Yes, I also have to add. Could you please add to your syllabus as well? Full color table of contents index. Just put it right in there somewhere.
Okay, we'll do that.
All right. Thank you, Geoff.
An entire generation of game designers.
Just fix that. Right. And if they're doing miniature games, 4 factions. Just tell them right out of the box. Just don't even. Just if you learn only one thing from my class this year, just All right. Thank you, Geoff. You'll save generations of anxiety.
Seems to me, Geoff, if you take Russ's advice, it's going to start snowballing like that scene from The Jerk. There's just one thing you've got to remember. Okay, 2. There's just 2. Okay, wait.
4.
There's 3 things you've got to. Okay, there's only 4
7,
things.
Sir.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway, back to XCOM.
Right. Okay, so in this I don't even want to call it a rules booklet. In this pamphlet that suggests you should go read the app, there is this initial setup section, which really actually also is insufficient. So you really got to go through the app. So the app actually walks you through the setup. And the first thing you're going to do is assign the roles. Now, this is another stumbling point for the, and I know I'm sounding like I'm picking on this game. I really actually quite enjoy it. So just say that right up front. But one of the first things is, so you've got these 4 major roles. There's the commander, the chief scientist, the central officer, and the squad leader. All of these sound really cool. So it'd be kind of cool to kind of know what you're getting into with each of these roles, so your players can kind of volunteer to do what. And there's not really, in the rules pamphlet that suggests you go read the app, it just says, has these 4 little icons for each of these people. And so it says the commander is responsible for keeping track of the XCOM budget and deploying interceptors to repel alien UFOs. Now, that's a cool combination of features because, if you're just the guy working on the money, that sounds kind of dull. But if I also get to launch fighters, now you're talking. So
I figure that Craig would be lining up to be in charge of the budget, that would be his job.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Credit balance? Where can I sign? Does it come with, mimeograph sheets, too?
But alien fighters, Craig. Alien fighters. Okay.
Yes,
then you've got...
I think Geoff and I are sharing a little moment.
I know what you're talking.
You don't have to jump in here with your Ameritrash bling.
Then you've got the chief scientist. And now this guy's whole job is to...
cheap scientist?
Chief. Well, both.
Cheap?
It could be cheap.
Oh, but...
Chief.
Okay.
Chief scientist.
Chief. Oh, chief. Oh, okay.
Yes. Now, the chief scientist's job is to manage essentially the tech tree, which comes in the form of a deck of cards, right, Geoff? And so he's going to be trying to assign upgrades, and he's going to be upgrading different things. So he's going to be upgrading the jet fighters. He's going to be upgrading your infantry. He's going to be upgrading and removing effects of other events in the game. And so he's really got a great role. Well, I should say that the commander, that budget is critical because every piece of plastic that ends up on the table costs money. And so if that budget guy's not budgeting well, that's a problem. And you need all that plastic on the table to shoot down the UFOs and defend and complete small missions and things like that. The chief scientist, he's there, if he's researching better body armor, your troops can not die as much. Your jets might kill UFOs more frequently, things like that. So he's upgrading all your stuff. But he's got to be guessing where you're going to need the upgrades first, second, and third, right? The central officer, he kind of has, I think, he's kind of like, if I be so bold to make a Dice Duel reference, he's like the captain in Space Cadets Dice Duel because he seems like he has a very minor job, which is he is the guy who's responsible for controlling the app. And I love the app. The app actually says, if you are not the central officer, please pass this iPad to the central officer. So the central officer's job is to manage the iPad or your app system and shout out what everybody's trying to do. And his whole job is really just to coordinate command and control. Right, Geoff?
Yes, and he also gets the satellites, which can be super important.
Oh, yeah, the satellites are important. I forgot about that, yep. And finally, the one I think most of the people, when we first start playing the game, really want to start at is because it seems like the coolest part, and it also harkens back to the core of XCOM, the squad leader. He's the guy responsible for the actual infantry forces that are going to be not tactically deployed, but they'll be strategically deployed and put on various mission cards to try to complete certain missions, which is what you need to do in order to eventually win the game, right?
Yep.
All right. So those are the 4 rules. Did I miss anything, Geoff?
No. One of the things just graphically that I thought was nice, I guess in retrospect it's not all that it's expected, but they have a specific side of the board for each player. It's kind of subtle, but if we screwed it up the first time we played and we were all sitting on different sides, and then we're like, oh, I probably should have been sitting over here because all the stuff for the central officer is right on this side of the board. So make sure that you go and select the board that is most appropriate for the role that you're playing.
Yeah, I do really, the components for this game, as usual, with Fantasy Flight, not only look good, but they're super duper functional, chock full of graphic design. And if you're sitting in the right spots, there's a spot for everything and everything has its place, right? So it all just sort of works. And you really feel like it when you have really, really good graphic design, I think one of the things it does is your mind is able to transcend the fact you're playing a game and start to imagine the world you're in. And XCOM definitely gets to that point, for me anyway, a couple times throughout the game when it gets swinging.
And if you've got fewer than 4 people, somebody's just going to double up or end up with all 4 jobs. If you're playing by yourself, you just do everything.
And I think
I have played with 2 players a couple of times, and I was very happy with it. So we'll talk about that when we summarize. But basically, the game plays that we're describing exactly the same, except that one person will be doing multiple jobs, and I think it adjusts the times a little bit in the app for the amount of time you have to do stuff since you're a little bit more overloaded.
Yeah, I played it both all 3 or 4, I can't remember times, but all the times I played it for 4 players. I just go into the game store on a Tuesday night and be like, hey, let's play XCOM, and usually there's a small crowd that's like, sure, because A, it plays quick, and B, a lot of people haven't played it yet. Once you've played it once, it's actually really easy to teach. The tricky part is just getting the head around it the first time because it's so different. But But yeah, I'm with you, Jeff. I think it might play player lower, but I really like the everybody having their one assignment because there's not a lot of downtime between plays, and it's nice to be able to think ahead. And another thing this game does, which I think you'll see as we talk about how it works, is Jeff, one of the things you guys did with Dice Tool, which I was so impressed with, is that because you're so focused on your work, you don't it removes one of the problems of co-op games, which is that there's one guy, sort of the alpha geek, that kind of leads the whole squad and says, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this, and everything sort of works out, and you're really just giving orders and you're all playing for him. This game as well, because there's so little time between the things you've got to be responsible for, you've really got to be thinking when you're not actually doing to be ready for the next time, right?
Exactly.
And so it keeps you very focused, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you look around and you're like, oh, look what we did, kind of thing, So it's kind of very much like that. But let's talk about how that part works. So setup is really is not super complicated. Once you kind of read through those text walls on your phone, you assign the roles and you set up reserves, which basically means there's little pads of little sort of placemats in front of each player that have spots for the various tokens. There's an enemy deck that's got to be built, and the enemy deck's going to consist of certain alien factions. It's going to be depending on the mission. What's nice, again, is once you pick the mission in the app, it tells you how to set your alien deck up. So here's kind of a cool thing where instead of you need to have pages and pages in a rule book, says if you do this, if you do this, the app just says, oh, I see you've selected this mission. Here, make the alien deck out of these cards, which is kind of nice.
Right, and you also get assigned where XCOM HQ, which continent you're starting in.
Yes. Now,
and depending on the continent that you're starting in, you will get different special abilities for the game.
Yeah, there's a token for XCOM HQ, which correlates to that little big glowing X in the video game. And yes, exactly, just like the video game, in the video game you can select where your base starts, and there's pros and cons for where you are in the world. In the board game, depending on the mission, it's assigned, but again, there's pros and cons for where that is. And last but not least, you got to set up there's a couple decks you got to build, but that's right in the tutorial. Walks you through that. And there's also the panic track. So really, there's really two things you got to watch out for to avoid death and dismemberment, right?
Yes.
They're really, the first thing is, and the most foremost thing, and this is right out of the video game, is you got to keep the people of the world from panicking. And so there's this really cool, sort of really wide panic track on the game board with levels, tiers of panic going from yellow through various stages to red, right? And there is a token for each major of the world nations. And these continents, thank you. And these continents start in certain positions. Do they always start in the lowest position, Jeff, or does it depend on the mission you get? I think it
depends on the mission.
I think it depends on the mission, the player count. Yeah. But the app tells you where to put these things. So different countries are in different states of panic. Now, there are things you can do throughout the game.
I've noticed North America, in my experience, always tends to be the most panicky nation.
That's just, we're a panicky people, Jeff. I blame the Canadians, honestly.
Sure.
But anyway, So there are things that will happen that will increase the panic level, and there are things you can do that can decrease the panic level. And if you played the video game, it will be intuitive what you do to decrease panic. For example, get some satellites over those countries, things like that. But there's other things you can do, and it kind of walks you through it in the game. Jeff, is it any one country that gets the red, or any two countries?
If two continents reach the end of the panic track, then you lose. And if a continent reaches the end of the panic track, which has some special name, you can't recover it anymore. Like you talked about, there's some missions. If you accomplish certain missions or you do certain things, you can reduce panic in continents. Once they've reached maximum panic, they're gone.
Right.
So you really want to try to pull stuff back from the edge.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to watch that. But the other way you can lose is aliens in the base, right? So
yes,
there's a track.
It's all about the base.
That sounds bad.
Yeah, it's kind of like, remember Battlestar Galactica, that awesome co-op game where there's Cylons can get in your ship and move through these little things. When they get too far on the track, you die. This has got one of those too. So there's a little track like this where aliens will start to move. Your track will start to move in worse and worse conditions, and you've got to repel and defend the base, or you will die there also, right?
Yes.
So keep an eye on your base and keep your eye on the panic track. That's the two things that are the most important thing. Now, to win the game, you have to expose the final mission. So when you're setting the game up, you're going to choose a invasion plan. And in the tutorial, it's always the invasion plan occupation. And the invasion plan is a giant, really cool artwork card. It's double-sided. On one side, it sort of shows the mission with some art on it, and that goes in the center in a special spot on the board, very prominent place. But at some point during the game, the app is going to say the the final mission is unlocked, and you flip this card over, and then it shows you the final thing you've got to do to win the game. And it's usually send your troops in there to beat them up, right? But it's got some difficulty to it.
Yeah, there's different special rules on the card to beat the final mission. And we also have a house rule here that when the final mission is revealed, you have to start singing the final countdown. So nice. You may want to adopt that.
I like that rule. I like it a lot. So, Geoff, have you found it to be a consistent reason for the final mission to be revealed? It usually seems to me you have to complete some standard missions to get that to happen.
It's my understanding is, the more regular missions you complete, the faster the final mission will become unlocked. But even if you don't complete any missions at all, eventually it will become unlocked. But that's one of the interesting things about the game is that it's, there's that uncertainty, and it's not like you're rolling a die where you know exactly what the chances are. There's mystery in what's going on in the app that's not visible to the players in terms of what's going to happen. So until it's just a new turn starts, and you hope it says the final mission is unlocked, but you never really know for sure what's driving that.
Yes. So you're pretty much at this point. You're ready to begin. You've laid everything out. You got your mission on the table. Everybody's got their cards. Everything's ready to go. And now we're getting ready to start. And there are really two giant phases in the game, which are completely controlled by the app. There's the timed phase, and then there's the resolution phase. So in the timed phase, what's going to happen is a bunch of essentially what I call flashcards will show up. Flashcards is a misnomer, but basically the screen's going to change to a very specific format on your tablet or your device. And a couple things. If you're playing in tutorial mode, during the timed phase of the game, what's going to happen is it's going to come up and say something like what's an example of this, Geoff?
Well, there's usually stuff that you have to do, like it'll tell the science officer to draw new tech cards, or it'll tell you to put alien flying saucers on certain continents. So there's things like that.
Right. So I'm looking at one now, for example, and it'll say. I'm trying to run it, and it's running out of time on me. But it'll show it. It'll show a card, and it'll say like put two UFOs in Asia, right? But it'll also very clearly it'll tell which role is supposed to do something, what they need to do, and there'll be a timer counting down very, very rapidly. Now, if you are in tutorial mode or mode 1, I think you can pause a timer. So is that right?
Yeah.
Tutorial
mode, the first two turns, that it just completely dispenses with the timer. Right, so it just shows you the phase, and it'll show you the rules about what you're supposed to do. And then when you get into the third round, then it starts the timer. But there are different difficulty levels. There's easy, normal, and hard. Mm-hmm. And that will affect how much time you have, and it'll also affect kind of the pause thing, which we could talk about now or we could talk about later. Yeah, the time events at the end.
Well, let's talk about the pause thing. So what's kind of interesting is you can pause it.
It's pretty cool. So basically, when you're the central officer who is in charge of managing the app, so their job also, in addition to telling people what to do, is when their job is done, they have to hit the done button. Which sounds easy, but when I'm the central officer, I tend to get so caught up in making sure that people are doing the right thing that I forget to hit the done button, and then the timer runs out and bad things happen. But you want to hit the done button as it's counting down. And if there's any time, depending on how much time you have left in the phase, let's say, and some of the phases are different. So, for example, just like putting two flying saucers in Asia might be 7 seconds. Mm-hmm. But if you have to choose a new mission, which the squad leader does, you have to pick two missions and decide which one you want to embark on. And you got to look at it, and there's a lot of details on there. So it usually gives you like 30 seconds or 40 seconds to do that. So it will vary the time based on, what the activity is and the difficulty level that you're playing on. So depending on how much time you have, it'll put time into this little time bank. Mm-hmm. And at any point during a phase, if you want to, you can hit pause. You can pause the countdown clock. Mm-hmm. And then it starts draining time out of your little time bank. So basically you can kind of bank time to use later phases, like when you're assigning soldiers to missions or things that might be a little bit more complex if you need to use the time. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately also there's a whole bunch of special abilities that players have, and that's what you start with some, which we talked about based on where your headquarters is, and every position starts with certain special abilities. And every ability is either a timed ability or a resolution phase ability. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are the timed phase ability, you have to play during that time step. which is, all of those steps happening in sequence is just one big giant timed phase. You could play it any time during those, you can use those. But at the very end, before it gets to the resolution phase, it stops and it says, okay, you can resolve any additional time phase effects that you want to use. If you forgot to use any or you didn't get a chance to use them, you can use them then. And in the easy mode, you have an infinite amount of time then to just go through calmly and look at the abilities that you want to use and decide which ones you want to use. And as you get into the higher difficulty levels, it basically uses that time bank. So the faster you do all the other steps, when you get to the very end of the turn, you'll have more time to decide if you want to trigger any other of your special abilities before you leave the time step and start rolling dice to see what happens. So I think that's a very interesting mechanic. I think that's really kind of the heart of the game, is this whole time management aspect.
Yep.
And I'm not sure how good the game would be if that wasn't there, because a lot of the decisions are kind of simple. But a simple decision, when there's a clock counting down that's starting at 20 and it goes to 5 decimal places and the clock's just whirring and spinning down, it just it messes with your brain, and definitely brings a huge amount of tension and excitement into the game to have those countdowns you have to go through.
Yeah, it's a very cool screen because it's got sort of the map on the top usually. It's got a little scrolling like news ticker at the very top talking about little fluffy things that you don't have time to read, but it gives you this little stretching, oh God, things are happening. And then the timer's buzzing, and these things, as Geoff was saying, they're very, very quick, easy to do things, but what you're doing here is building up for the resolution phase, and if when the resolution phase comes, you haven't reacted in the right way to the right things, you're going to be in bad shape. So you're making very quick decisions, and they seem simple, but it's easy to mess up. So things that are happening here, and the other thing that's interesting is the sequencing of what happens in the time phase isn't always the same. So in a normal game, right, you normally say, well, here's the phase, you do phase 1 thing first, you do phase 2, UFOs land, and then you deploy infantry, and then you deploy aircraft, but in this game, no, you don't know what's going to happen. The sequencing can be different every turn. The app is sort of rolling some dice in the background and deciding what to have you do first, second, and third, and where things are going to happen. So it's a very interesting mechanic to go through. So for example, some of the time things going to happen is, the central officer has to do UFOs detected, and it'll say, place 2 UFOs in South Africa, right? And then it'll say, okay, now it's time for us to assign research. So the chief scientist now has to go out and decide. Everybody's got sort of a limited resource they can do, and this chief scientist has actually little tokens representing microscopes, and these are his scientists. And he has to decide which of his research cards he's going to put these scientists on in hopes to reveal and unlock these technologies. And so he's got to start making those kinds of decisions, right?
Right.
You've got
and everything you do costs money. So every scientist you put on a project costs $1. Every fighter you send out costs $1. Every soldier you send out costs $1. Every scientist you send out costs $1.
So right, and the budget and the end in the resolution phase, you have to have money for all this. So what's happening is the science officer saying he's got that thing. He's got 10 seconds to pick how many scientists he's going to put in this card. The number of scientists you have in a card are going to indicate how many rolls you're going to get for the likelihood for the technology to be unlocked, right? And so he's going to say, "Oh, guys, what do you think? Should I put 2 down? It's going to cost us $2." And the guy doing the budget's going to be like, "Yeah, we got enough money for that. Put 2 scientists on there." And then someone else is going to say, then all of a sudden it's going to say, you don't know what's going to come next. What could come next is, enemy in the base, which means you've got to put an alien token card. Squad leader, put an alien card in the base track. Oh no, we're going to need some more resources on some guys defending the base. Meanwhile, the next card is deploy a squad to mission. So now we have an option to put some squad members on a mission. Where am I going to put them? Every piece of plastic you put down is going to cost money. We still got the budget for, I think so. Go put the plastic guy on there. Quick. Time's running out. Okay, go. Next, UFOs detected. Oh my God, we got 2 more in orbit and 1 more in South Africa. Put them on there. Now you're like, oh crap, do we need jets in South Africa? We just spent all of our money on research and soldiers. Where are we going to get the money to launch those jets? So that's the kind of stuff that's happening inside these like 10, 20, 30-second time bubbles, right? Geoff, is that how it feels to you guys?
Right, which is why what you were talking about earlier in terms of, the alpha player and stuff like that. Like as the scientist, if I'm playing the scientist, usually one of the first things that happens in a turn is you draw new tech cards to draw your hand back up to 6. Now, I should be, while other stuff is going on, I can be looking and helping the other players, but as a scientist, I really need to be reading those cards and trying to decide which ones are going to help us so that when it gives me the 15 seconds to put down one of the tech cards that I want to develop and decide how many scientists to assign, that I'm ready to go.
Right.
When it says put down tech 1, it's a little too late at that point to start
Right.
looking through your cards.
Yep.
You need to have a plan in advance. And that's why when you're playing with like only 2 players, it gives you more time for each of those phases to try to compensate for that.
That's right. And the other thing, too, is so what happens to the commander? So the commander's job really is jets and money. So what you'll see, like one of the events that might come up is emergency funding available. And the commander now can move some of his little money chits off of his card into this little open area. And that makes that extra money. So there's a fixed emergency fund of money, right, Geoff, sort of locked aside for you.
Yeah, you start the game with 8. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty open. I mean, when that emergency funding step comes on, there's like just like a slush fund, and you can take as much money out of there as you want. You can take it all if you want.
Right. But when you do take it out, it's going to get
at
spent.
the end of the turn, anything you don't spend is lost.
So you have to decide, is now the turn to draw on our bank? Now, you do get a little bit of income each turn also, but that slush fund is limited for the entire game. There are some things that can happen, some kinds of research and other events that can give a little more money in there, but generally speaking, that's a limited resource for the whole game. And so you're kind of going to decide strategically, and again, inside 20 seconds, whether or not now is the time to pull some of that money out, because you can't pull out of the banked money at the end of the turn when you need to fund those jets. You've got to take it out before then if you're going to need it, right? So you got to kind of decide then and there. So you got to, is now the turn to start pulling from that money? Some might say, oh, it's now or never. Take out $10, or whatever you're going to do. So that's really cool. Then there's satellites as well, Geoff, and they go out and they can be used to.
You said those were super important. Let's hear
satellites
about those.
are super important, Geoff. How do satellites? What makes them super important?
Well, there's a couple of things you can do with satellites. I mean, the main kind of in-game function that they're used for is, as Russ mentioned, there's when the flying saucers come in, they can go straight to continents, but some of them go into orbit. And the satellites are used to attack the flying saucers that are in orbit. If you do not, the ones that go to continents, for each flying saucer that you don't get rid of by the end of the turn, the panic level in that continent goes up by 1.
Right.
If the flying saucers are in orbit, they don't directly affect the panic. But what they do is they can what they call scramble your communications, which means the more flying saucers there are in orbit, the more chance there is that the turn order of all the sequence of those things is going to get messed up.
Yep.
And the problem with that is that it may, for example, tell you to assign guys to defend the base before it's told you how many aliens are attacking the base.
Right.
So it makes your life a lot more complicated.
Also, don't the UFOs in orbit automatically come down to continents next turn?
Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they stay in orbit.
So you never know in this game.
Most of the time they
happen,
come down and they will.
You never know with those crazy UFOs.
That's right.
So they will come down and go to a continent. So they first hit you up on the comm. They scramble the comms, and then they end up panicking somebody the next turn most of the time. But the other thing that the satellites are really useful for is they are a currency for activating some of the special abilities.
Right.
Like there's one special ability which is super duper useful, which we'll talk about when we get to the resolution phase, which lets you reroll, basically get a reroll when you get a fail.
Yep.
And that costs like 2 satellites, I think, to put on there, and you can do it once per turn. And so some of these things are super useful to make sure that you have these resources left over to be able to assign to these special abilities, which doesn't cost any money to put them on the cards. It's only stuff that goes on the board that costs the money. But the proper use of the special abilities is the difference between life and death in this game.
Yes, it definitely is. Another event we didn't talk about yet is the Crisis event, which basically means the commander's now got to pull 2 cards from the Crisis deck. Decide which one is the least bad.
Decide which horrible thing is going to happen to you.
And he then puts it into the crisis pool, which will be resolved later. So he's got a timer running, so he doesn't have an hour to decide. He's like, oh God, this one looks so bad, and he plops it in the deck. And later those things are going to happen to you as well. So
right. And again, in the normal sequence, the crisis stuff usually happens relatively early in the turn. Mm-hmm. So for example, you can draw a card that says, before the resolution phase starts, all of the satellites are going to go home and not be in orbit. Right. And so if that comes up early and you see, that's what's going to be, I'm just not going to bother to put any satellites on. But if you've already committed 3 satellites onto the board, that's $3 that you have to pay for them. And they're then it's just going to go home anyway. So that's another way that the communication scrambling can mess you up, is by moving those crises later in the turn when you don't have a chance to react to them. But again, the squad leader now, just to kind of bring another example of these special abilities, the squad leader always starts with this special ability called, I don't remember what it's called. But basically, if you send a guy to that card, again, it doesn't cost you money, but he can't go to missions and things, but he does let you eliminate one of the crisis cards.
Right. You can send a guy.
So there's all kinds of different ways to mitigate these
cool little things.
Bad things that are happening.
And so what's happening as these during the timed phase, you're seeing the world's picture sort of build that you're going to have to resolve in the resolution step. So you're going to see that there's UFOs piling up over here. There's a crisis deck going on over there. There's aliens in the base over here. There's these other missions you've got to solve. And so one of the other things that's going to happen is the commander's going to see deploy interceptors. And now he can take jets from his little pile of jets plastic pool and he can move them onto the map. Now, the problem is any jets you move onto the map cost money. So again, but you're going to want to put them into continents where there are UFOs because the jets are going to, in the resolution phase, fight the UFOs and attempt to shoot them down before any panic's going to set in. So what you're really trying to, but again, none of this is guaranteed because it's going to be dice rolls in resolution phase. So you don't really know if one jet's going to be able to take out one UFO. Two jets probably can do it. If there's three UFOs there, do you even want to waste a jet over there or not? Because he's probably going to die horribly and it's going to cost you more money to get him back into the hangar, to get him back to the point of the board. And so there's these kind of decisions, again, you're making in like 20 seconds, right? So those are did we get all the major sort of timed events? And the thing to remember too is there isn't just like.
And then there's deploying to the mission card. I guess we talked about that. Yeah, the mission, the base. So those are deploying the soldiers. Those are the other.
And you don't just get one of these, right? So there'll be the scientist will put a scientist down, and then I might deploy a fighter, and then we'll have a crisis card, and then Geoff might deploy some infantry, and then the scientist will put another scientist down. So it's kind of going bing, bing, bing all around. It's not just like, so it's all of a sudden, it's you, it's me, it's Craig, it's Rafe, it's Craig, it's Greg, and then all of a sudden, boom, boom, you're done.
What decides that order again?
It's just the app. The app just tells you what to do next.
The app just says, hey, squad leader, enemy in the base, put an enemy card in the base. Okay. And then
is there any sense as to why it's doing that? Like, can you get like?
So there's like a big.
There is a standard sequence. There's a relatively standard sequence that it will follow from turn to turn to turn, unless as more aliens come in, especially if they're in orbit, it will tend to mess up the standard sequence. Mm-hmm. But once you've played a couple of times, you know kind of the general rhythm. Of,
you get to
the
way
the turn goes.
So could this game have been done without an app?
I don't think it could have easily been done without an app the way it's done.
It sounds like the app's
certainly
doing
from
an
a
awful
timer,
lot.
with the time stuff, it would have because everything is a different time. You couldn't have done it with an egg timer, a sand timer, and you can't. The way it banks the time is very clever too. So that if you happen to do something super fast, if I'm the scientist and I know I'm going to put this one down, and he says, "Scientist, research tech 1," and you put the thing down, put a scientist down, boom, I'm done. Okay, I only took 3 seconds out of my 15, so I'm going to get a bunch of seconds in my time bank that I can use later when So there's things like that it absolutely relies on the app.
Yeah, it's definitely a chess clock model, and I think the changing of the sequence too would be hard to do without a deck of some kind. But even then, the impact of the changes of the sequence, also the level of complexity also changes as well, and then the ability to inject when the mission comes up and all those other things. And if you think about games like Battlestar Galactica, which try to do that also, but how many of those games have been ruined because someone forgot to deal the right number of cards in there? That kind of thing. That problem is just not in this game because it's all controlled by the app and it doesn't make those kind of mistakes. So, but I think Geoff's nailed it with the whole sort of chess clock angle they've got going on here where you can bank time, really does make it very unique. And when you get past the easy levels and work towards the normal and medium difficulty levels, you really start to see the game. You're playing the game as it's designed, and really started seeing. You're really getting a pretty unique gaming experience. Mm-hmm. So after you go through,
and it also because you never know when these UFOs are coming in. You don't know in the turn. You may think most of the time when you do your interceptors, there's no more UFOs after that, so you kind of have an idea what the board looks like, but. Again, as the situation deteriorates, it may throw some zingers at you extra, and and throw some UFOs in at the very end. So,
So, a couple of things you can do we didn't mention, but you can bring soldiers over to, make them elite and things like that. But that's pretty much the timed phase, and then at the end of the time phase, you get a little warning. Okay, time phase is over, and now we're going to go into the resolution phase, and the app now walks you through this step. It shows the XCOM jet flying along in a cool little animated graphic. I'm walking through the app now. And then what happens is you're going to go through a series of steps of the phases. So the first thing you're going to do is
and these steps are always fixed.
The same.
They're always exactly.
So this is just going to happen. So you know what's going. First, you're going to do is audit the budget. So basically, you're going to make sure you have enough money to cover everything you put out. So for every piece of plastic, whether it's a dude or a jet, you got to pay a coin. For every scientist token you put out, and for every satellite token you put out, all those things cost credits. And so you got to spend those credits. And if you don't have those credits, I believe you take panic hits, right, Geoff?
The most panicky nation panics by the deficit, I believe.
Oh.
Which is bad. So don't go over budget. That's the quickest way to lose the game. Whatever you do, it's better to have one nation have an extra UFO on it and get a little annoyed with you than it is to go over budget, in my opinion.
Well,
right,
we've
Geoff?
clearly seen across the globe how serious people take budget deficits.
Right.
Yeah,
I think the game hit that nail on the head.
I think under certain situations you may actually want to overspend your budget under certain circumstances.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be
that's advanced XCOM.
Yeah, that's advanced XCOM. There are tactical options here that you may want to do, but for the most part,
it's not like you lose the game. And also, we didn't talk about if you run out of time on one of those time steps. It doesn't. It will throw more bad guys at you.
Right.
So you will summon more alien UFOs. You'll get another guy invading the base or something like that.
Don't do that either.
It's not like you instantly lose the game or just immediately forces you to go to the next step. It just throws in more bad stuff.
Now, if there is any extra money, let's say you under budgeted, you can use any of that extra money. The next step in the recruit is the recruit and build phase, where if you have any dead soldiers or dead jets, you can bring them back with the extra money you have. So.
Right. $1 each.
Yeah, $1 each. So you do want to be under budget if you want to bring back things from the dead. But if you've nothing to bring back from the dead, you've wasted any money you're under budget on.
Right. Especially early in the game, you're going to want to do that because there's a lot of stuff to buy early on.
Next up, you're going to resolve your crisis cards. You're going to go through that crisis deck one at a time and see what's going to happen for each one of those things. There's nothing to do about this. It just happens, right, Geoff? There's no counter to this.
Right. Unless you could use that special ability to kill one of them, but you had to do that before you get to this point.
And then you resolve tasks, right, Geoff? So how do the tasks work?
Yeah, this is kind of the heart of the resolution phase, and it's important to understand this because this same mechanic is used
for everything
across the board anytime you're resolving something. So there's two different types of dice that come with the game. There's a whole handful of blue D6s, which are, I forget what they're called, task dice probably, or success dice or something, but they have 2 good sides and 4 bad sides. So they basically have 2 successes and 4 failures on each die. And depending on how much stuff you allocate to something or how good your soldiers are at the mission, and we'll talk about that a little later, that determines the number of dice that you roll. So if I assign 2 scientists to try to research something, I'm going to roll 2 of these blue dice. 3 scientists, 3 dice. And you roll them and you check the number of successes that you get. And everything has a certain number of successes that you need to do it. So the techs are all rated from 1 to 3, and that's the number of successes that you have to get. For each success you get with the fighter jets, you destroy one of the enemy UFOs.
Right.
And so on. Now the tricky part is that in addition to rolling the blue dice, there's also 1 red D8, which is just numbered from 1 to 8. And there is this track called, what's it called?
It's called the
this
marker.
track always screws me over track.
Yeah, it's the threat marker. It's the
threat track. That's right. So there's a threat marker that starts on the number 1. Okay. And so when, in addition to rolling your success dice, the task dice to try to get the successes, at the same time, you're going to roll this red die. And if the red die is equal to or less than, the number that the threat marker is on. So initially it's a 1. So if you roll a 1 on your 8-sided die, then you have failed. You still get to count any successes that you rolled, but something really bad is going to happen to you.
Right.
So for example, if you're rolling for the fighter jets and they're flying against the alien UFOs, if I roll a 1 on the red die and I roll 1 success on the blue dice, I'm going to still remove 1 alien UFO, but all my fighters are going to die.
Right. All of
that
them.
were in that.
Bad news.
All of them. Then after that, if you did not fail, let's say I rolled a 3 on the red die, the threat marker is going to move up 1, so it's going to go up to the number 2, and now I have a choice where I can roll again to try to get more successes, or I can just stop. If I roll again, then it's the same thing as before. I can try to eliminate more UFOs, but I need to, on a 1 or a 2 now, all my fighters are going to die. And if I go another 1, it's going to be a 1, 2, or 3, all my fighters are going to die.
Right.
If I stop, I don't get any more successes at that point, but all my fighters would fly home safe and I wouldn't have to buy them new for the next turn.
Right. So it's definitely there's this cool press your luck mechanic in everything you do, whether you're researching or fighting UFOs or fighting with your infantry. There's this press your luck element. Do I go for that extra success and try to solve the mission or shoot down that last UFO at the risk of all my fighters or my guys that are put on that mission or whatever? Or do I stop while I'm ahead but not quite finish what I'm trying to get done, right? So that's
now I have a question for you.
Yeah.
These other games that use apps and stuff like that, it often feels like either the die rolling and the token movement is just incidental or the app is incidental. And that balance is very hard to achieve. Now, are you feeling like when you're rolling these dice, does that do something for you that the app doing that for you wouldn't do? Like choices, like talk to me a little bit about how that emotionally intersects and how it serves the experience of playing the game.
I think the most interesting mechanic in this game was the decision although there's other cool, interesting mechanics, but was really the decision to have a timed phase and this not timed resolution phase. So in the timed phase, that's when the app is really being an app and you're almost playing the app and the board's like incidental. Almost. It's not incidental, but you're using it, but it's kind of like building up and you're really focused on the app. In the resolution phase, you almost put the iPad down and now you're playing a board game with dice.
Yeah, the only thing the resolution phase does is it just keeps track. It just tells you what the next step is. It doesn't even know what the result is.
Right.
Like you don't tell it, I destroyed 2 fighters here or something like that.
It doesn't know what's happening. It doesn't know.
Right. So like some games like Golem Arcana.
Yep.
It has to know everything. So it has an option where you can roll the dice manually if you don't want the computer to roll the dice for you, but then you got to enter the rolls and you got to tell it where you moved everything.
Exactly.
The app knows very little about the game state.
Right.
Yeah, it asks you 2 things about the game state. It asks you the panic level of continence, and it asks you if your base has been destroyed.
Right.
Those are the only things it asks you about the game state, and how many UFOs are still in
did you defeat the final mission? So it can say, yeah.
But it's it's really, really basic stuff. Other than that, it has no idea what's going on the board.
So it really feels like the resolution phase is where you are. What I also like about those 2 phases is during the timed phase. We've talked about this before, Craig, with these really frenetic and Space Cadets Dice Duel is a great game. It's so intense and you're so heads down. You're like, you're like freaking out when it's over. The best, it's like that's when you're telling the stories about the game is where the game shines because it's the remembering of the game that's awesome. Because while you're in it, you're so focused on the tasks, you're kind of like not socializing, right? So in this game, during the time phase, it's like that. You're like, I don't even know what's happening. I'm just trying to solve it. And then during the resolution phase, you kind of slow down and you look around and go, oh, right. You really blew that whole research thing, didn't you, Geoff? It's like, yeah, well, I couldn't decide.
And I think you need that in a timed game.
Yeah,
I think that that was the thing we actually tried with Dice Duel to make it continuous action and no stop. In fact, Stronghold came back to us when we were first doing it. He says, I don't want any stoppage of play. I want it to just be continuous until somebody dies. Right. And we tried to do it, and it was very difficult to do in a way that, didn't have people screwing things up left and right. But B, you needed that pulse thing to kind of where it was intense and then it stopped and then it was intense and then it stopped. You couldn't keep that, and I think in this case, like if the resolution step was timed, this game would be
brutal,
lousy.
Yeah,
it would not be a fun experience. So
it's kind of like you
have your little burst of like 3 minutes when you're doing all this stuff, the 20 seconds and the 10 seconds and the 3 seconds, whatever it is. It's not that long. And then when you get to the end of it, then you look up and you kind of see the carnage.
Right, and you're like, oh geez, we end up with 2 jets against 4 UFOs. That was a bad call. And they're like, let's hope we get lucky. And that's when you decide we're going to press for luck. We're only going to lose 2 jets here. We might kill 4 UFOs, kind of thing. So
I think they really did strike a nice balance there between the app and the physical portion of the game.
I think so too. It doesn't feel gimmicky playing it, and it really adds. If you've got a nice stand for your tablet or iPad, it actually adds a lot of the experience and makes it feel very high tech and sci-fi-ish.
Yeah, because it's like it's you do feel like. You can envision somebody walking around with this tablet. It fits in the world. Right. It doesn't feel like it's some alien thing that's dropped in.
Exactly, that's a good point.
No pun intended. But I mean, it feels integrated with the aesthetic of it and the whole way that the game world functions.
As the commander, you'd have that tablet, and it's not like playing on a tablet a fantasy game. You're like, what? This doesn't really feel right. So as Geoff just described the core mechanic and everything, the rest of the resolution phase is pretty straightforward. So, for example, you resolve research, which is really just, as Geoff already described, do those task checks against the research cards. You get dice equal to the
And
number.
some of these things are really like the scientists. If you fail, like I talked about how your fighters blow up if you fail the interceptor mission. If you fail the scientist missions, the scientist tasks, the scientists just flip over to their like exhausted side, which means they're going to be out for the next turn. You only have 8 for the whole, you have 8 scientists. So we never found like losing scientists to be that big a deal. We never got into a situation
you lose
where
them for
we
a
didn't have
turn.
enough scientists.
We had a
to
situation
play.
where we were down scientists for a while. It was kind of painful, but we had a really aggressive research department.
Okay. Must have cost a lot of money.
It did. It was expensive. And then, like, if there's any satellites in orbit, they can. One of the other things satellites can do is they can fight the UFOs in orbit. So that's the same sort of thing as we talked about the fighter combat.
Yeah, and again, if you fail on that, the satellites just get flipped over and exhausted, so they're just out. The ones that you allocated to that, if 2 or 3 or however many you sent into orbit, just get flipped over to their exhausted side until it's turn.
And basically, it's miss a turn when that happens. And Geoff already described how fighter combat works. Is the same thing. So any fighters assigned to continents where there's UFOs, you roll those dice and hope you shoot down some UFOs. And again, the thing about having more fighters there is you're going to get to roll that many more blue dice and hope for the number of successes you want. And you want to get more successes per roll because every roll you have to make again, you're going to increase your chance for the threat level to go up and cause troubles. And then finally, there's the base defense, right, which is where the soldiers fight. You want to describe that a little bit for us, Geoff? How the infantry works?
Yeah, this is probably the most complex part of the game, and I think it's sort of a nod to the tactical combat in the game. Although Russ talked about how it's not like Omega Protocol, level 7 or whatever, where you're actually moving around a map or something like that. There's a little bit of nod to tactics. So there's 3 different types of soldiers that you have and can recruit. There's the snipers, the support, is that right? And the assault.
Yep.
Those are the 3.
Yep.
And each of them has a couple of different icons on them that shows what they're good at. And they each also have one of those icons as a gold special icon, which is what they're really good at. And whenever you turn up an alien, or on missions, some of the different steps of a mission will show those icons. And what you want to do is any soldier that's assigned to attack an alien has to match one of those icons. And you can send one soldier for each icon. So if an alien has 3, is showing 3 different icons, maybe the sniper icon and the explosion icon or whatever. If it's got 2 icons, you can at most send 2 soldiers to attack that alien.
Right.
Now, if an alien or a mission step has a gold icon and you send a soldier with a matching gold icon, then you get to roll 2 dice for that soldier instead of just the 1 that you normally roll per soldier. So if you can assign 3 soldiers and one of them matches a gold icon, you're going to get to roll 4 of those blue dice to try to get successes. And then aliens, you just have to get a certain number of hit points to try to eliminate them.
Right. And so you got to wipe so missions are the same way where there's a certain number of successes you need to solve them, and there's with icons, and then when aliens are in the base, you got to deal with those guys also, right?
There's some subtleties, like you can, you could send up to 4 soldiers to defend the base, or 4 soldiers to defend the mission. You could send 4 to each spot, and you can, for example, when you're fighting an alien, you could just send 2 out of the 4 soldiers to fight that alien, and then if you fail, only those 2 guys die,
right? And
the 2 guys that are left can either just go home and say they survive, or they can just press on by themselves and try to do the next step or whatever. So you have a little bit more flexibility in how you allocate the soldiers. You can also upgrade soldiers to elite status, and elite soldiers will also give you a bonus die when they're on a mission. But if they die, it gets even more painful because they're elite.
And that's pretty much it. Then you're just checking to see if it asks you, did your base get destroyed? Because basically if you didn't defeat the aliens moving into your base, you lose. And if you say destroyed, you lose the game. If you say not destroyed, you're back on to checking to see if you've resolved any missions. Same thing we've already talked about. You check your panic levels, and you're ready to go for round 2. And that's pretty much the whole game in a nutshell, right, Geoff? Do we miss any any major stuff?
Yeah, I mean, just the only thing is on the missions is that the missions are multi-step.
That's right.
So there's usually 3 steps in a mission, and 1 or 2 of those steps would have aliens. And the other steps would have just some icons of just some unnamed tests that you need to do. And you don't have to complete a mission all in one turn. So like if you beat the first 2 steps, and the thing about the missions is that threat marker keeps going up.
Right.
Even after you defeat the first alien and you move on to the next step, the threat marker keeps up and up and up and up.
Yep.
So you may want to just like do the first 2 steps, and then the threat marker may be too high for comfort. So you just stop and you wait, and then you wait till next turn, and the next turn all you have to do is a third step, but your threat marker gets reset back to 1.
Right. So that's pretty much the whole game in a nutshell. So I think it's time to get final thoughts on this bad boy. But before we do that, Craig.
Yeah.
In the style of a fresh XCOM recruit seeing an alien for the first time, please describe the patent-pending D6G rating system.
Sir, yes, sir. The first thing you need to understand is that aliens come in many different shapes and sizes, and some of them are more threatening than others, sir. So we have to rate them all. We're going to rate them on a sliding scale using numbers as if we were rolling dice, sir. So we're going to, a 2 or something low is going to be really, 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 really bad or good. And, a higher number, like a 6, is going to be really, 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 really good or bad. And so basically, if you're, oh my God, it's got 10 eyes!
All right, thank you.
Basically, if it's a low number, it's a good rating. If it's a high number, it's a bad rating. And a reroll is a half. All you mathematicians can just suck it. And by it, I mean
the alien,
a lollipop.
Yes.
An alien lollipop.
Right. Yeah, I think our explanations for this get worse and worse over time. Okay, anyway, so Geoff, guests first. So what are your final thoughts on XCOM, the board game?
Overall, I enjoy it. I think that it does a really good job of capturing the spirit of the game. You really feel like you're under siege. And it does what all, really good co-ops do, which is give you multiple things to worry about all at the same time. And it's about prioritization. There's a lot of bad things that are happening to you, but what's going to be the most bad? The app is really interesting. And I think there's more interesting things that they can do with the app. One thing that they have not really done, there are some slight variations to the way the game plays very, very subtly in terms of the different missions, in terms of some of the different special powers that you start with, in terms of where it tends to route the aliens and how bad the alien attacks need to be. But the core rules are the core rules. I would love to see in some other upgrades have it throw some real curveballs in there. Which it could do and just, force you to discard text or, there's just a lot of stuff that they could do with the app and, take advantage of the element of surprise and the hidden nature of it. We talked about the fact that you don't know when that final mission is going to come up. And that's one of the things that's always kind of distinguished board games from video games. And there's pros and cons to both, but a board game lays all the rules and the math, and if you're willing to go through it, it's all bare, it's all there for you. You can see exactly what's going on. Right. In a video game, very often everything's hidden. You don't know how much life the boss has left, or whatever. It's just he looks like he's getting a little more shot up and he's dragging a little bit, but you don't really know what you need to do. Or there could be some crazy surprise where you kill him and then, another guy jumps up that you didn't know was there or something like that. And, the app gives you the capability to do that. You don't know when that final mission is coming up. You don't even know what the odds are. I mean, maybe you don't know when a 40K mission is going to end because you got to roll a die to see if it's a 4+, but you at least know it's a 4+ for this chance of this turn. You can plan on that. You really have no idea where you are. And some people find that frustrating. Some people might find that exhilarating and add tension to the game. So I think that's one feature. Personally, I feel like they nailed it in the right side of things. I think that other than the fact that they didn't actually include the rules in the game, which I, again, talked to death, I 100% would have done. I think that they preserve the right amount of mystery in there. And I would like to see them come out with expansions, which they could just push through on the app that would, just give you some more surprises once the mission goes.
Right.
Just from a strategy standpoint, and we've only played 4 times, but I have the feeling that the texts and the texts that you get are super duper critical to victory. And there are some texts that are definitely better than others. And if you can get those on the board in a timely fashion, and there's ways that you can dig for texts, dig for cards, that it's gonna make a huge difference. There's one that just lets you automatically get text by discarding by exhausting scientists and not having to roll and all that stuff. And that's a huge one. If you can get that one, you can just snowball that into some really good stuff. So I'm a teeny bit concerned that over repeated play, that there may be some best paths. There may be some text that you definitely want to get early, and you can kind of get into a groove and say this is the way that things kind of need to roll. I haven't played it enough to reach that point, but just I'm a teeny bit concerned about that. The biggest issue that I have with the game is that task system. The
pressure luck.
The pressure luck system. I understand what the designer was going for, Mr. Eric Lang, but there's a couple of aspects that bother me. First, the difference between success and not success under certain circumstances can be absolutely punishingly devastating. If you have like 3 fighters, attacking, if there's a really strong UFO presence and you send a lot of fighters there to try to knock it down, if you roll a 1 on that red die,
done. Right.
That's it. You're done. You didn't, maybe you got a couple of successes, but you're done. You're toast. There was nothing you could do about it unless you saved your reroll thing. But maybe you were saving that for your mission or whatever. So, I would be happier with the game, with the task system if it started on like a 0. If you always got at least 1 roll.
Or you had to get
that
under.
You couldn't die.
Yeah, make it under the number.
That would help.
Yeah. Try it out. Maybe a house roll under is what kills you instead of equal to.
Yeah, exactly. You could do under instead of equal to.
Yep.
The other thing is that there's no nod to the risk that you're putting is and not that I'm going to bring real world physics now into the world of the XCOM board game
of aliens
but like let's say there's one we ran a situation where there was like Africa was probably North America because North America was always panicky. North America was on the verge of going into the final panic stage, and there was one UFO there that we had to destroy. Right, we sent 3 fighters there to take it out. And if you roll a 1 on that first shot, you're gone.
Yeah, but if you got a success, you should have killed him, right?
Right. Well, yeah, you would kill
all blanks.
But the point is, you lose all your fighters, and the fact that I've now got 3 of my guys against 1 of his guys, doesn't factor into it whatsoever.
Right.
I have exactly the same chance of all my fighters blowing up and me being down $3.
Why would you send 3?
Well,
why would you send 3 then?
Because you get to roll 3 blue dice to try to get
more
the
chances.
successes.
So what Jeff's saying is there's no defensive bonus. There's an attack bonus, but there's no defense bonus.
Yeah, there's nothing there's nothing like I've really.
They will only die if you roll a 1 on all 3 of those dice?
No. Just the 1 red die.
So you roll.
The other dice don't have any numbers.
The
success dice only have a 1/3.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And again, there's only one out of 3 chance on each die. So, if you send out 3, I guess 2 dice gives you a 50-50 chance of getting at least 1 hit. But you know what I mean? It's not, most of the time in a battle game, if I have like a 3-to-1, if I send 3 guys, my guys against 1 of your guys, if I lose, I'm not going to lose all 3 of my guys. I might lose 1 guy. Right. And so I just, there's some games we've played where we just can't make a task roll to save our lives, right? And we lose those games horribly, and there's nothing we can do about it. If you don't roll well, you're not going to win. Right. And there's some games we played where, we were just, we were pushing our luck and we were, it was getting up there and it's exciting and everything, but I feel like, there's this big setup of all of these different things and these allocations, and you've got to very carefully manage your budget, but then it all comes down to a very, very swingy set of dice rolls that you have to make. And it can be extremely punishing and demoralizing to just have everything blow up just right out of the gate. You got 4 soldiers on there. You rolled a 1. Sorry, that's it. They're all dead. So, on balance, I'm going to give it a 4+, or maybe a 4+ with a reroll somewhere in that area. But I think it can get better. I would like to have seen a little bit more balance and nuance with the dice rolling system. That's the big issue I have with it. But I'm very excited about the app. I'm very excited about the presentation and the way that they use the timing element to ramp up the tension and to make an engaging game experience. It's something that has been done in certain ways before, but it's never been done like this. So that I find very, very exciting and exhilarating to try.
Well, thanks. That's great. And Jeff, I would agree with you pretty much 100%. I think they did a really good job with the app. I like the way the game feels. It does feel like XCOM to me. I think they captured the theme well. And I agree. I haven't been quite so burnt by the pressure luck element. We've just been lucky. Haven't rolled that many 1s early on. It seems like we lose it around threat level 3, which feels about right, most of the time. So I guess if probability's with you, then it works pretty well. But you're right. I could see a few bad rolls. I could imagine Craig playing this game and rolling ones every time he attacked and just being frustrated to heck.
Yes, so can I.
So I would see that as a downside. But overall, I think it plays well, and I do love that pause and resolution phase where there's no thinking in the resolution phase. So there's no analysis paralysis. It's all the good fun fighting and realizing how well you did. And I do like the dice element in that in the resolution phase, nothing's guaranteed, right? So that makes the decisions you're making in those timer modes really tough because you don't really know is 3 jets or 4 jets what you really need to make sure you win. But I agree with you. It is pretty punishing without that.
I mean,
reroll.
I think the interesting decision in a push your luck game is, are you going to push your luck? Right. That's the fun part. And if you roll a 1 on that first roll, you're deprived of even that choice.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It's just over.
I think it should be less than that number, and then you'd be okay. And whatever probability change you have to make to the game to keep the balance in there, that's what I might have done. But otherwise, I really like it. But I'm with you though. I think there's not everybody's going to like this game. I think it has that inherent goodness. The double-edged sword is the way I would put it. Is that it's got that frenetic part. So if you're looking to sit back, relax with your friends, and have a drink and just chill out and socialize, this is not that game because you got those moments where you're just fully intense. But then you do have that sort of resolution phase, but it's still got those tension moments that some people like and some people don't. So I think, Geoff, you're right on with a 4+. If you like the XCOM universe, you owe it to yourself to play the game. It captures the spirit of the strategic element of the game very nicely. Or if you like sci-fi and you interested in technology and the amalgam of tablets with your board games, they did this really, really well. I think they did a really good job where you feel like you need the board and you feel like you need the tablet, and it would be hard to imagine this game working half as well without either of those things. So yeah, I like it a lot. I'd say it's a 4+.
Okay.
Craig, how would you rate your desire to try this thing out?
How long does your average game take?
90 minutes, but most of ours have been in an hour.
Yeah, it takes about an hour.
About an hour.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if it's about an hour, I would say I would give it a 50-50 shot. That I would if there's a space available that I'd play it. It sounds interesting. I would like to just check out the technology, like you said, because so far even Golem Arcana to me seemed kind of like, well, you could go one way or the other, and as Geoff said, with the die rolling, you could do it yourself, or the app could do it. If they really have somebody has finally integrated, and Eric Lang could be the guy, integrated that technology and the board game aspect so that both feel equally weighted towards the experience. I'd like to check that out. I've never played XCOM, the game, obviously, so I don't have any sort of draw to the universe, but it seems cool. And so I would give it a straight up 4+. Nice. As far as my willingness to play the game if it was being set up in front of me.
Very good. Well, there you have it. There is XCOM, folks. Geoff, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us.
Excuse me, that is Professor
Professor Englestein.
Professor Geoff.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
I had a great time doing the show. Thank you again.
So
it's always great having you on.
It is. And if people want to follow you and know what you're up to and find out when your classes start, where should they go to track all that information?
Well, the podcast is at ludology.net or just Ludology on iTunes, etc. And my Twitter is at G Englestein, Engelstein, which is the best place to find me. So
nice. All right. And Geoff, I'm challenging you to Hearthstone in about an hour, so watch for it.
Okay.
All right. Take care, Geoff. Thanks for coming on again.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ever Notice is brought to you once again by all of our fine friends over at patreon.com. Those folks who went over there, looked at that great still image, watched our amazingly ridiculous video, and then pledged money anyway. Thanks, guys, for helping us put all this together, for helping us keep this on the air and keeping on. Because if it wasn't for you guys at this point, things would be very, very different, I promise you. And today, in particular, still going with the single name brigade. I don't know if there was a change in how you sign up for Patreon or what, but Alex, Jared, Justin, Matt, and Andrew. So thank you guys, and thank everybody who has helped us out over at Patreon. You ever notice how your priorities can shift rapidly dependent upon what you're focused on at any given moment? As I talked about in the achievements section today, I painted a lot of my bones models this last couple of days. And I had this odd sensation that occurred to me as I was painting them. I was painting them specifically for Russ's Brothers campaign. So we would have all these cool models, and I wanted to be part of it. He was like, "Oh, we got plenty of pre-paints from, and I don't want to use the pre-paints. I want to use my models that I can paint up and that I can look at them. I want to use my Dwarven Forge stuff, which we use all the time now. I wanted to have that sort of input, or not so much input as a partnership in sort of bringing the game to life. And so I got all the models out that could possibly fit any of the categories he asked for that I had, because I didn't have any fishmen at the time, although now I do. And I started painting them. And of course, as I have been telling you guys for years, it always takes me longer to paint than somehow in my head I think it's going to take. I understand that I paint faster than most people, but in my head, I should always be painting even faster. So it's a little confusing to me and frustrating to me when I'm not painting as fast as I think I should be painting. So I spent, Karen was working a lot, cause she won't be able to work a lot while I'm in Africa. So she was picking up a lot of shifts, which is where I can paint the most because, she's at work at night. And so I paint and I don't have to feel guilty about painting. Not that I have to feel guilty anyway, as she tells me repeatedly, but I do. So I was painting and I can't stay up too late. And I have stuck with my resolution. Longtime listeners will remember that I used to stay up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning regularly painting because I would get this manic kind of fixated mental thing going on. And so, and what happened would, I would in my head, I would decide what I was going to paint, and I wouldn't stop till I painted that. And I've always been bad at figuring out how long it was going to take me to paint something. So I would, stay up ridiculously late and be disappointed because I still wouldn't finish. So now I've sort of changed how I schedule it in my head, and I schedule a painting session rather than a goal for me to accomplish. So I'll say, okay, I'll stop painting at 10, for instance. And so I was doing that, and things weren't going quite as fast as, of course. And so I had these 32 models, and I was doing all the pirates, and I even did something that I don't usually do. I primed them black, which I did, which I talked about in achievements. And then I gave them a coating of dark brown dry brush, very, very thick dry brush, instead of the bleached bone that I usually use. And then I did another dry brush of a lighter brown. So I was giving everything sort of a rich brown color that I could then use for flesh for a darker skinned person, or leather, or armor, or wood, or whatever that model needed. And then I would detail around that so that, sort of pick out the various things. People who are curious can see, after the second night, I did spend one last night doing bases and stuff, but I don't really count that. So I tweeted out a bunch of pictures. So if you go to my Twitter feed, you'll be able to see the pictures of the models that I did in 2 nights. But the problem was they weren't quite done. And so Sunday came around, and I was playing with my son, and I know I'm going to be away for a while, so I don't want to do anything. So I wasn't writing, I wasn't doing anything else. But in my head, I was like, oh, I want to get these guys the bases and everything done before John gets here and then the other guys get there. So I found myself like really, really distracted, and then disappointed that I wasn't going to have time to paint. And then it's this sort of disjointed thing occurred. Like I said, my priority shifted, which is really weird. And I started wishing my friends weren't coming over so I could finish painting. And this lasted like a half an hour where I was like, oh God, these guys are coming over. And I totally lost sight of the fact that I'm doing all this so that when they come over, we'll have these cool models to use. And so, it was a very strange, like, sort of wake up when I realized what I was doing, and it made no sense. And it's again this fixation on a goal that I have that like sort of plays me like a fiddle when I lose focus to it. And so I had to kind of slap myself and get it's just ridiculous. They're just models, even if they're not painted. We've used unpainted models before. We've used unpainted bones models before. So it's not going to be a, deal killer. It's not like my friends are going to go, you know what, this stuff sucks, we're not coming here again, and I think that's sort of a subconscious thought in my head also. But mainly it's just, I want this stuff to look as cool as it can look, and this is as cool as it can look right now. And that was the realization that I had to make. So I didn't worry about it. And John came over early, and then our friend Joe ended up having an issue in his neighborhood where I guess he's the go-to dad, and somebody fell and hurt themselves and didn't want their own dad helping him, and he had to help him. So he ended up coming late. And while he was late, I asked John exactly which models he needed. Of course, of the 32, he needed 3. And so I painted the bases while we were waiting. So that was kind of a cool little added detail. And then the next night, Monday night, I did a little bit of inking while I was working primarily on the fish models. So I got everything done anyway, and we're going to use those models again, and it's going to be great. So you've got to keep focused on your priorities, and your priorities are usually not the models you're painting or the box control devices that you're trying to design. It's usually the actual games and the people that you like to play with. And so that was my little lesson that I have to constantly relearn, because, they say that thing about, if I have to learn a lesson more than once, I'm an idiot, or I don't know, something like that. I think Confucius said that. Well, that's not me. I have to constantly relearn these lessons. And so I did. And so, that's all I've got to say about that. I am now off to South Africa. Thies, maybe we'll see each other. Maybe we won't. Listener reached out from South Africa. It would be really cool to hook up, but I don't know. I don't know if my cell phone's going to work. I have no idea. In fact, I'm going to need an ATM when I land. I'm not going to have any rands, and I don't know, if I'm going to be able to do that either. So, wish me luck, and hopefully I'll be around for episode 67 or 167. I was already around for 67. That was fun. Oh, good.
Achievement unlocked. You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by either emailing us at info@the d6generation.com or by posting in our official D6G episode thread at the top of the DACA discussions forum on DACA.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. See you in 2 weeks. Thanks for listening, and happy gaming.
The theme from Total Fangirl comes from the soundtrack of The Last Night on Earth, the zombie game, courtesy of Flying Frog Productions, and is a composition of Mary Beth Magalanes.
He was approached to do a Hunger Games game.
Yeah.
And they told him, they said, you cannot make it about the actual Hunger Games part.
What?
Because the books are not about glorifying the violence of the games. They're anti the violence in the games. And if you make a game about the games, then that defeats that purpose.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Well, what if it was a game about
BS? Because the whole reason that book was popular was because the teenagers killing each other.
What
if they did a game about
it's
escaping
all anti-violence? I get it. No.
What if it's escaping the games, though? That seems reasonable.
So instead he did one just about finding food in District 12 and trying not to starve. The game died a horrible death.
So you call it Hunger the Game.
Hunger. That